Were they her paranoid images, or mine? Was she perhaps a bit psychic? Many people would dismiss such an idea as nonsense, but experience has taught me otherwise. I decided to stop the hypnosis. If she was psychic, she needed help from someone who could understand that. In the 6 years I've been practicing, I've had one patient with that kind of understanding. Claire Belmont. Claire is something of an Oxford star now, making a career for herself in professional theatre. I did not feel it appropriate to make the introduction myself, but I suggested to Sylvie that she go to see the show at the Playhouse, then seek her out after it. Perhaps nothing would come of it, but it was worth a try. In the meantime, I felt I should continue with the appointments as a way of keeping an eye on Sylvie, and I gave her my after-hours contact number. Suicide is always one of our fears. Last Friday at 7:10 in the evening, I got a call on my home telephone. Sylvie wanted to talk to me, urgently. I went back to the clinic to meet her. She wanted to let me know she was going away for the weekend, and told me about some plan Claire and her friends had to get rid of the stone by taking it back to where it came from, near the Ridgeway at Uffington. I thought it was a bad idea, and she was obviously having doubts about it herself, which was why she rang me. I told her to go home and stay there, and put the wretched stone somewhere out of sight. She said something about putting it in the family museum, and left. I apologize for not disclosing this earlier. I was very shocked when I heard the news of Sylvie's death, and was not thinking clearly. One further thing I must mention, the leaflet advertising our clinic. We have never distributed any such leaflet. Bryony wasn't sure what to make of this. Donnelly was an oddball, no question. While Pavan was here, she could get him to take another look at the leaflet, which was filed in the incident room. Pavan was still busy with the rock, and Elsingham was checking through the ledger, so she went to the cabinet herself and drew out the leaflet. Unfortunately, she'd seen no reason to ensure it was kept in an evidence bag, and it would have collected a lot more fingerprints since they found it. She took it over to where Pavan was at work. But at that moment the phone rang. Elsingham picked it up.
"For you, Dr. Pavan," he said. "HQ."
Pavan let out an exasperated sigh as he took the receiver, but Bryony could see his expression change as he listened to the caller.
"And when was this? Then why was I not called earlier? Is Superintendent Foster there now? Very well, I'll leave immediately. You'll have to call the photographer back. He left here 10 minutes ago."
He put the phone down.
"There has indeed been a second murder, I'm afraid to say. And a third. In the office of Malcolm Nash at the Pitt Rivers Museum."
Bryony was not about to be refused a seat in the car ordered for Pavan, and as they sped down the Banbury Road, she prepared what she would say if Foster made any attempts to block her from participating in the investigation of the murder site. When they arrived, Foster had yet to make his appearance. They were greeted by an elderly man, who introduced himself as Dr. Erickson, the senior curator. He lived nearby, he explained, and had been called as soon as the cleaner raised the alarm. It was he who rang the police and ambulance. The cleaner was in a terrible state, and was being attended to by the ambulance staff. Erickson himself had the mask-like, glassy-eyed look of those who are in deep shock and don't know it yet, and he spoke haltingly. He pointed towards the open door of Nash's office at the far end of the gallery.
I won't accompany you down there, if you don't mind. Obviously, I'll be here if you need me."
Their footsteps echoed on the stone floor as they walked down past the giant dinosaur skeletons. 2 of the ambulance officers were sitting on a bench by the back wall. Even they were shocked, Bryony could tell. Professionals had their own ways of showing it. Stiffness in their posture, awkward angles of the head. One of them stood up and came to meet them as they approached.
"There's a doctor waiting to check the bodies," he said, "but it's a bit unusual in there. He wanted to leave it till the police arrived." "I'm a medical doctor," said Pavan. I can confirm the deaths myself.
When they came level with Nash's office, the paramedic dived back to his seat without looking that way. Bryony and Pavan stood side by side in the doorway, staring at the scene beyond. The grey walls were splattered with blood, so much of it that the room looked like an abattoir. It had streamed down the glass in the picture frames and on the doors of the cabinets and pooled along the floor against the skirting board. Books and papers had cascaded into the mess. There were bloody handprints on the wall to the left, where a missing picture frame left a strange blank rectangle. The windows were smashed, and one of the bodies lay underneath, amid the glass. The other was on the floor in front of them, face down, its clothing torn and bloodied. Nash's clothing. What had been its head was surrounded with an ornate picture frame. Large pieces of rock were visible on the table and around the floor, which was also strewn with lumps of plaster that had been gouged out of the walls. Bryony heard Pavan swallow, but when he spoke, it was in a carefully managed tone.
The first thing we need to find out is whether the rocks were all thrown from this doorway, or whether some came through the window from the other direction. Let's check the window from the other side.
The photographer arrived as they were making their way along the outside wall of the building. The window of Nash's office was about 6 feet above ground level, and 2 of the stone missiles lay on the gravel below it, surrounded by broken glass.
So, said Pavan, these were thrown from inside the building.
He took the camera from the photographer and used the zoom lens to inspect the windows. Bryony left him to it. She wanted to take another good look at the room before Foster arrived. She thought of what Pavan had said about the rock thrown at her.
Hurled with extraordinary speed and directness.
Whoever attacked these 2 men must have injured them badly at the outset, enough to make escape or retaliation impossible. This is what could have happened to her last night. The body on the far side was that of a stout man in a brown suit. He had fallen under the window. Perhaps he'd been trying to escape that way and had become quite literally a sitting target as he fell, slumped against the wall. His head lolled to one side, with a gaping chasm where the left ear should have been, and a mass of tangled gristle, hair and bone spilling over his shoulder. The other victim, who was surely Nash, had been making for the door. Why the picture frame? A desperate attempt to find a shield, perhaps? If he'd grabbed it from the wall and come towards his assailant, perhaps he'd also raised it to use as a weapon. Nash didn't look much of a hero, but he'd been smart, and he'd been brave, and he'd been trying to help her. A crushing sense of responsibility for this was encroaching on what was left of Bryony's powers of concentration. She couldn't let it take over now. That was not going to do any good to anyone. The other instinct was to spring into action, get the team organized, bring in more officers. It was vital to move fast and in several directions. She became aware of Pavan standing near her again. "Which came first?" she asked. "The attack here, or the stunt in the incident room? Will you be able to tell?"
My guess is that this came last. It's unlikely the perpetrator could have got away unbloodied. He'd risk leaving forensic traces if he paid a visit anywhere else. And, of course, there would be the increased likelihood of attracting attention.
"If the attack on me was a warning, then this is what I was being warned about," she said. "Next time it'll be me that's done in. Someone's got a powerful determination going here." A small crowd was gathered behind them now, a mixture of uniformed police, museum staff, and members of the soccer team kitted out in overalls. Canning was moving among them, directing them to stand further back. Bryony went over to speak to him, drawing him apart into an alcove beside a case of small mammal skeletons. "Elsingham took a call from Dr. Nash yesterday afternoon," she said. "He'd been doing some further research for me, with the help of another specialist, a Mr. Crouch from the Ashmolean Museum. We should check Crouch's whereabouts immediately. Everyone connected with this inquiry is at risk. We need to arrange protection for the witness I saw yesterday, Hannah Jensen. She scribbled down the address and tore the page from her notebook. Send a car round there now.
Yes, Inspector. The superintendent's on his way. As soon as I've got his okay, I'll proceed.
Bryony felt like shouting, and her voice came out strangled with the attempt at control. We need to check on these people immediately. Where's the nearest phone? She marched off to find Dr. Erickson, who started when she appeared in his office, but responded to her request with some remaining presence of mind, vacating his seat and pushing the phone towards her.
I'll leave you to it,
he said awkwardly. Bryony rang Hannah's number, but there was no answer. Then she tried the Ashmolean Museum. Mr. Crouch was expected at 9 this morning for a meeting, but had not yet arrived. And no, they would not release his home address or phone number, not without seeing her identification. She swore loudly as she hung up.
Keep your hair on, Williams, said a voice from the doorway. And by the look of things, you might be needing a helmet as well. Clear out the way, will you? I'm going to need somewhere to park myself.
Foster was puffing hard, and was a worse colour than usual, crimson with patches of yellow on the cheekbones. He used Bryony's arm to steady himself as he lowered his bulk into the seat that she pulled out from behind the desk for him.
All right, he said. I won't say I've seen worse, because I might be telling a lie. Find me an ashtray, will you? And pull up a chair for yourself.
First, sir, I have an urgent request to make. I want to organise police protection for a witness, Miss Hannah Jensen, who was helping me with inquiries yesterday. The 2 men who've been killed were also helping us. Everyone who gets involved with this case could be at risk.
You're like a bull at a gate, aren't you, Williams? What I want from you is a proper statement about what happened over in the incident room last night. Now, don't get huffy about it. I'll admit you were right about the rock throwing being connected to our case. Give me the humble pie and I'll take a piece of it. But you were getting too many ideas too quickly. You're going off in all directions. I've seen it before with young detectives, and it's not the way to get results. That's why I want you to put all this down in writing. And tell this Jensen woman to come in and talk to us if she's got evidence worth listening to.
She isn't answering her phone. I'm extremely concerned about her.
Then go and look for her yourself.
Yes, sir, but it's also urgent that I talk to you about the inquiry line Dr. Nash was helping with. It's central to the case.
Put it in your statement. I've got 10 things to deal with already. I've got the chief super descending on me any minute.
What? Macready? Foster put a cigarette in one side of his mouth and lit it as he spoke from the other.
Yes, Macready. And he won't be in the mood for tea and cakes. Thank your lucky stars you won't be first in the firing line.
He shook the match out. I'd like to talk to him.
Oh, would you now? Anything you've got to say about this case, Williams, to me or to anyone else, I want you to put in that statement. Then we'll have it down in black and white. And the chief super can make up his own mind about who he needs to talk to on what subject. Now, if you don't mind, I'd better find out whether the cleaner's finished going through her 50 fits yet. Can't blame her, I must say. Go away, Williams, and make yourself useful. I'm sure you know how.
Bryony could hear sirens converging on the building from all directions. She walked out briskly and hailed one of the cars drawing up, showing her CID card. I need you to take me to an address in Jericho, she said, and with the sirens still wailing, she was whisked off without a question. Chapter 14. As they rounded the corner into Canal Street, Bryony spotted Hannah's car with the bonnet up. Then she saw the feet of the slight figure leaning in to inspect the engine. American-style sneakers and socks with red stripes. Bryony got out and caught her unbuttoned coat in the car door as she slammed it. "What's all the noise about?" asked Hannah, emerging from the depths of the engine. "You'll wake the neighbours. Nobody gets up before midday round here, you know." "I just had to check you were all right." "Sure I'm all right. Why wouldn't I be? You mean you came flying around here in a police car with the siren on to ask me if I'm okay? You're a bit of a dipstick, you know that?" She lowered the bonnet. "No oil. How about asking your friend there to nip down the garage for some oil?" "Where's the garage?" "Up the road in Walton Street. But I haven't got any money either. I don't get any more dole till Monday." Her eyes narrowed as she looked at Bryony. Something's happened, hasn't it? Yes, but not to anyone you know. Just as a precaution, I'm going to request police protection for you. You what? You mean I've got to have some cop hanging around me all the time? That's not how it usually works. The patrol cars would keep an eye on the street to see who's coming and going, and they'd need to be aware of your movements. Not on your life. Anyway, I'm not planning to be around here for the next couple of days. Where are you going? To look for Claire? Where? Start off at Avery. Ask around there. That's where all the hikers are supposed to start or finish. Someone might have seen her. Hannah, that's a job for the police. But they're not doing it, are they? They will be. I'm about to see to it. So am I, Hannah shot back. This is turning into an extremely dangerous case. I can't warn you too strongly against putting yourself at risk. I'm not easily scared, you know. I trained on the high wire. And I'm smarter than those fatheads you work with. You won't get far without any oil, said Bryony. Stalemate. There was nothing for it but to leave Hannah's destiny in the hands of the patrol for the time being. She used the car radio to put in the request to HQ. And tell them to include the problem clinic on their rounds in Kingston Road. I'm going there now. It was only a few minutes away, so Bryony was running up the steps by 9:30, half expecting to be told that Donnelly wasn't in yet. The receptionist, who looked startled at the intrusion, became flustered when she asked for him. He's most particular that he doesn't want to be disturbed, Inspector. I'm afraid he has no choice. It's a police matter of some urgency. Oh dear, it's just that he said he's not feeling well. I think he had a very bad night. I'm sure he did. He's not the only one. The window of Donnelly's consulting room had been smashed, and he was standing in the corner holding a framed picture that had fallen from the wall and spilt its glass out over the bookcase. He gave Bryony the look of a hunted animal. Can't you just leave me alone now? Someone doesn't like the fact that I talk to you, and you coming round here will only make it worse. I've told you everything I know, so please, just leave me alone. If you're being threatened, that's all the more reason for having the police around. When did you discover this? An hour ago. I came in early to go through some notes for another patient. Then you haven't reported it to anyone. And I don't intend to. Bryony took a step forward, crunching on the glass. Mr. Donnelly, you need help. We're obviously dealing with dangerous people, and we'll have to arrange some protection for you. But we also need your help. This isn't the only attack that was made last night. There are lives at stake here. Don't I know it? He handed her the injured photograph. That's my wife and baby. The rock was aimed straight at them. Do you think I'm prepared to put them at risk? Police protection is completely useless. What would you do? Put a bobby on the front door and round-the-clock shifts? I doubt that somehow. This is my business, and I'll clear it up. There's nothing else I can tell you that would be any help at all, and I want no further involvement with your inquiries. You may have no choice. Did you find the rock? He pointed to the floor by the bookcase. This rock was smaller than a tennis ball, half the size of those used on Nash and Crouch. All right, go home now, Mr. Donnelly, and stay there. We'll have to cordon off this room until it's been checked over. As she walked through the main doors of the Ashmolean Museum, it was evident that news of some kind had already arrived. Staff who would otherwise have been distributed singly in their allotted places, behind desks, on the solitary caretaker seats in the galleries, were standing about in clumps in earnest conversation. Bryony found the director's office, and when she showed her CID card, he welcomed her immediately and invited her in. The discussion was informative. Crouch was apparently a talkative, friendly man, and had raised the puzzle of the stone with several of his colleagues. Having deciphered the inscription, he had become fired up with curiosity, and had planned a further evening's work with Nash last night to identify the style of the lettering. No one knew exactly what time the two intended to meet. Crouch lived alone, and when he failed to arrive for his meeting at 9 this morning, they had rung him. Then someone had the idea that he might have gone to Pitt Rivers instead to continue the work with Nash. As his approval was needed to finalise some exhibition arrangements, they rang the Pitt Rivers to ask after him, and heard the news. Of course, no one was sure of the identity of the bodies, but the description of the clothing and stature matched. After sidestepping a lot of questions about what had actually happened, Bryony left with a list of names for interview, people who had known where Crouch would be and what he would be doing. Macready would be the one to decide how to proceed with all that. She'd done what was urgent. She didn't relish the prospect of trying to record all the key points of the case so far in a written statement. The way she felt right now, it would be enough of a challenge to write her own name. Before the car turned into Canterbury Road, she got it to make a detour around Alcuin Close. There was an officer on duty outside the front door, and he assured her everything was all right. The house had been checked hourly round the clock, and Gleeson was definitely there. 2 more uniforms were stationed outside the incident room, but inside it appeared to be deserted. Elsingham and Westcott must have been called in to help elsewhere. She made a mug of extra strong instant, then forced herself to sit down and type. An hour later, when she was halfway down the 3rd page of her account, she heard a car pull up outside. She went over to the window to look. Foster. It took him 10 minutes with 2 assistants to get himself through the front door and down to the room where she was working. How much longer was he going to hold up?
"I know what you're thinking, Bryony," he said as he took the seat his officers found for him. "You'd be thinking I've just about had it, wouldn't you?"
He stretched his great legs out in front of him.
"And you'd be right. The chief super took one look at me and ordered me to go off duty. But you know what did for me? That cleaning woman. I can't bear hysteria, Bryony, never could. I've dealt with a few roaring boys in my time, but that's different. That's one thing I'll say for Prince Pavan. He keeps himself on a very even keel. Got his work cut out for him over there. Seems what happened here was by way of an overture, eh?"
Or an encore. Whichever it was, there were 2 calls. A witness I'd been talking to over in Kingston Road got his office window smashed. The rock targeted a photo of his wife and child.
"Nasty."
Understandably, that witness doesn't want to have anything more to do with us.
"Well, we'll have to inspect the premises. He won't have much say in it."
"No. His office has been cordoned. Forensics will have to go through it. And I'd suggest an examination of the back garden, and some chats with the neighbours. It's a terrace house, so access to the garden would have to be via one of the neighbouring gardens."
"Oh, yes. Well, I can see to that, I expect."
"I thought you said you'd been ordered off duty."
"I can still make sure you lot are keeping up to the mark. Now, I sent DC Westcott on the trail of those footprints. She's a good solid worker, that one. It's a size 12 shoe."
"With a Clark's rubber sole?"
"That's right. I'm size 11, and I'm 6'2". A size 12 is likely to be my height or taller. We're not looking for an inconspicuous sort of person in that case. We're looking for the sort of person who tends to register on people's minds in the daily comings and goings. Chances are some bright spark in one of the shoe stores might remember selling a pair of shoes like this. I'll send Westcott with Canning to follow up those inquiries in Kingston Road. Have you checked Gleeson's alibi?"
"The local patrol have been keeping a 24-hour watch. They say he's been in the house all night."
"Good. Now have you done that statement?" "I'll have a read of it."
"I'm only halfway through."
"Well, get on with it then. Didn't ask you to write a novel."
"Following us, following us, following us, following us." "Oh, shut up," snapped Angela Gleeson. "If you're going to play that silly game, you'll have to catch the bus home next time." The silly game consisted of kneeling up at the rear window of the car to watch the movements of the vehicles behind them. Miles had invented it when they were much younger, and now they just did it to annoy their mother, because it involved repeating the words "following us" incessantly until the car behind turned off or overtook them. The steady line of 2-way traffic on the road out to Woodstock created the perfect situation for running commentary. "You're slower than the bus anyway," said Daniel. Miles made some exaggerated nods. "Everyone overtakes us. The Blue Mini's overtaken us. The Aston Martin's overtaken us. Ford Capri's overtaken us.
The Volkswagen Beetle's overtaken us. The pickup truck's overtaken us, Daniel chimed in. And you don't overtake anybody, not even that tractor. We had to wait till it turned off. The only one that's still following us is the white van, said Miles. And it's flashing its lights at us. It's going to go past us any minute. Following us, following us, following us. Now here it goes. They turned in their seats to watch it pull ahead. Wow, did you see that? What a rocket! He's doing a ton now. What's a ton? Asked Miles. What do you mean by that? A ton's 100 miles an hour. It's what the motorbike riders say when they're speeding. I'm going to do a ton. Just watch me. Daniel held his arms out like someone on a motorbike and started to make convincing sound effects with his mouth. Miles joined in, helping to build the noise to a crescendo. Right, that's it, Angela Gleason shouted. That's the last time I fetched you from school.
Chapter 15. Thursday, 25th September, 1974.
No morning prayers, then?
Elsingham poured boiling water into the 4 mugs and handed one to Bryony. She hunched her shoulders. Not my job any more. Macready's in charge now. I'm waiting to hear from him, but we've got plenty to do between us.
Does D.C. Westcott take sugar?
I don't know. Canning has 1.5.
He would. Will I take these through, then?
Yeah, I'll be there in a minute. Canning and Westcott had formed an effective duo. Yesterday afternoon they'd inspected Kingston Road and done a dozen local interviews. They'd been thorough, but nothing much had come of it, and Bryony was frankly bored with poring over the particulars of their account. She was also on tenterhooks about where the killer was going to strike next. It was 8:15. She needed to talk to Macready. Surely he had to call soon. If he didn't, she'd just have to chase after him. The search for Claire was of paramount importance now, and she was convinced this was also the way to unlock the case. Traipsing round back gardens was all very well, but someone needed to be getting at what was behind all this. Whoever made that attack on Nash and Crouch was driven. Insanely driven. No ordinary human motivation could account for it. Wanting to be on her own to think for a while, she went into one of the smaller rooms. Its emptiness was somehow calming. The desk was bare except for a phone, and a wooden chair was the only other furniture. Who could she ring? Pavan would be in the autopsy room, which was probably where Macready had spent most of yesterday. She felt sidelined. It wasn't personal, she told herself. It was a whole dimension of the case that was being sidelined. She picked up the phone, dialed HQ, and asked to be put through to the control room. The report from the patrol covering Hannah's lodgings and the problem clinic seemed to be satisfactory. Checks had been made every half hour through the night, and all vehicles and pedestrians on the streets between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. had been monitored. The same had been done in the area around Alcuin Close. Good, said Bryony. And if Hannah Jensen leaves the house, I want to know immediately.
Right-o, Inspector,
said the radio operator.
I'll pass that on.
Bryony put the phone down and stared at it. What now? The most likely place to find Macready was the Pitt Rivers. She decided to sort out the documents she wanted him to look at and go over there. The museum seemed otherworldly, with daylight streaming through the glass roof, and human figures in white coats or bright plastic suits moving around slowly among the pale skeletons. Nash's office, a chamber of horrors now minus the bodies, had its window taped over from the outside and was lit by 2 powerful angle-poise lamps placed on either side of the doorway. The blood on the walls was blackening, and a socko was taping over the handprints with squares of plastic. She sensed Macready's approach without looking round. The long, even stride gave a particular rhythm to his footsteps.
Williams, to which circle of hell does this little scene belong, would you say?
Sir?
Never mind. Come, we have things to discuss.
The clipped tones of the Aberdeen accent always seemed to have the effect of sharpening your attention, she thought. He led the way back to Ericsson's office, which was evidently being turned into a small incident room, and before she'd even sat down, began an account of what they'd found so far.
Both victims were hit in the head first and failed. Both attempted to get up again, but were being pelted with rocks at a quite extraordinarily rapid rate. They were 26 in all, sharp-edged flints, not large. The whole arsenal would fit in a small rucksack, but hurled with sufficient force to cause deep injuries every time. The attack took place somewhere between 8 and 9 p.m. and was the work of a single assailant, who entered through a door at the back of the museum. Nash left it unbolted when he came in for his evening's work. An assiduous young man, Williams, in the habit of working after hours.
Yes, sir. He was here on Sunday when I asked.
I have read your statement, Williams. You were consulting him about a stone.
With a strange design on it.
The evil eye.
That was Dr. Nash's opinion, she said.
And the good Superintendent Foster no doubt told you that is all unconscionable nonsense.
Yes, sir.
Which it is, Williams. Which undoubtedly it is. However, it is also dangerous nonsense. You're concerned about some missing persons who became interested in it. Do I take it, then, that there is as yet no search underway for these missing persons?
The Ridgeway Patrol from the Marlborough Station are looking out for them, sir. That's all.
Very well. I'll get in touch myself with the Wiltshire police.
She handed over Claire's diary, Donnelly's statement, together with his notebook, and Nash's photographs. These are the most significant leads we have so far. Nash took the photographs to help decipher the inscription on the stone. Macready went through them, frowning deeply.
And where is this stone?
In the incident room, sir, at Canterbury Road. He picked out 2 photographs showing a full view of the stone in its actual size, and handed them to her, then returned the rest to the envelope.
Very well, Williams. This is what I want you to do. Continue your inquiries into this mysterious object, wherever they may lead. Report to me at 6 this evening without fail, and keep your eye on this young woman, Miss Jensen.
Elsingham was standing in the doorway as the conversation ended, obviously wanting Bryony's attention.
Sorry, Inspector. It's the patrol. Just got a radio call saying they lost sight of Hannah Jensen. Her car's gone, apparently so is she. They've been cruising round with an eye out for her, but so far no luck.
I know where she'll have gone. Get in the car. Chapter 16. The clapped-out old Minnie with no oil in it must have got a new lease of life, because there it was, sitting in the Avebury car park with 2 white vans and a muddy jeep. There were tents pitched on a grass area at the edge, and the vans were clearly adapted to nomadic activities. The smaller of the 2 appeared to be packed to the gunwales with supplies and equipment, but the other was a Ford minibus converted for sleeping in. Bryony and Elsingham put their foreheads to the window to see inside, and roused a white bull terrier that was sleeping on the floor. It jumped up at the window and displayed an impressive set of teeth as it barked.
"All right, boy," said Elsingham. "Just checking."
The car park was behind the village, outside the rim of the stone circle, looking south towards the ancient mound of Silbury Hill. One of the first things they were going to need, Bryony realised, was a proper map, one designed for walkers rather than drivers. She drew her raincoat around her, conscious of its inadequacy in this exposed place. Strong shafts of sun beamed out from the horizon beyond Silbury Hill and blinded her as she tried to see the lie of the land. But there was also a light rain falling and a distinct chill in the air.
"She's not been here long," said Elsingham. "The engine's still hot. Feel the bonnet."
"I'll take your word for it. Come on, let's get after her." A path running off at the back of the car park was signposted to the village. It was bordered on their left by old moss-covered trees, but to the right the view opened out onto a field with a deep ditch scooped across it and massive upright stones set on the mounded earth above. Seen from here, the stones were not obviously part of a circle, but seemed to be positioned almost at random across the land. At a distance, they looked uncannily like human presences, standing guard over the terrain. So for a few seconds, Bryony was confused by the appearance of a set of moving figures. She stopped and watched them approach, gradually becoming more visible in the low afternoon light. There were 6 of them, dressed in long, flowing clothes and carrying staves that reached above their heads.
"Are they druids or what?"
exclaimed Elsingham, coming up beside her.
"They look like something out of my nephew's Asterix books."
More of them were converging from several directions on a level area in front of the two largest stones. Their cloaks were variously coloured blankets, tied at the waist with ropes and worn over boots and jeans. A solidly built man with a great bush of curling black hair was calling out and pointing with his stave, directing them where to stand so they formed an evenly spaced circle, with him at the centre and the staves planted behind them. Facing inwards, they began to make a low humming sound and stretched out their arms to join hands. The whole ensemble looked as if they'd taken a tour through the costume store of an amateur theatre group. One wore a top hat with streamers of green and crimson ribbon flowing from the back of it, and a ragged tailcoat with emerald satin lining that flashed through the holes. Standing between a woman in a fringed Indian tunic and a man in a tartan jacket was Hannah, who, with her hooded coat, looked quite as if she belonged among them. She picked up the sequence of their performance without missing a beat. As the hum reached a crescendo, they raised their hands in the air, faces turned up to the sky, then parted the circle on one side, opening it out into a crescent shape facing the hills to the west. The leader now stood with his back to Bryony, displaying the image of a branching tree on his cloak. Leaves of brilliant green and gold fabric had been sewn on loosely so that they shook as he moved. He called out some rhythmic phrases in a language she didn't recognise, and the others shouted a response. The line swung round in a quarter turn to face south, and the incantation was repeated. Then again facing east and north, before the circle closed for a recitation in unison that finished with a roaring crescendo.
"Very impressive," pronounced Elsingham. "But what's it in aid of?"
Bryony nodded her head towards Hannah, who was running over to greet them. "I've got a feeling she's about to tell us."
"Did you watch that?"
"Of course we did. It's not secret, is it?"
"Obviously not, since they included me, but you're not supposed to just spy on it."
Bryony ignored the remark. "So how long have you been here?"
"Half an hour, maybe. Bloke over the road gave me some oil from his shed, so I split. I got here just before 1 and ran into these druids in the car park. They're here for the equinox. You going to come and talk to them?"
"Yes, but don't tell them we're police. Not just yet, anyway."
"They're going to the Red Lion. I'll see you there."
As Hannah sprinted back across the field, Bryony turned to Elsingham. "I'm going to make some inquiries in the village and see if I can find the local cops. You join that lot in the pub. Try to get into some useful conversations, and don't let Hannah out of your sight." A busy road cut through the village, but there was an inner precinct set apart from the traffic, with a row of stone houses and shops leading down the hill towards the Elizabethan manor house. Bryony stopped at several of them to show the photographs of Claire, but drew a blank. So after buying an ordnance survey map, she decided to make for the museum. It was housed in an old barn that shared an enclosure with several other outbuildings, one of which had been converted into a cafe and another into a gift shop. Two middle-aged women sitting at the desk by the museum entrance shook their heads when she asked for the curator.
"Not here today, I'm afraid. You'd have to come back Saturday if you want to talk to him."
"Or write him a letter."
"Thanks," said Bryony, "but I need to get his opinion about an object." She took out Nash's photographs of the stone and placed them on the desk.
"Sorry, can't help you, love. You could try the museum at Devizes. They have a curator on the premises there most of the time."
Bryony decided to have a look around anyway, to see what was to be learnt. The carefully labelled displays told stories. Every place round here seemed to have a legend attached to it. There was the giant white horse that came down from the hill on nights of the full moon to feed in the great hollow called the Manger. Wayland, the phantom smith, supposed to inhabit the long barrow up on the ridgeway near the White Horse Hill, was traditionally feared. Tether your horse there overnight, leaving a silver coin on one of the headstones of the barrow, and in the morning you could return to find it shod. But never stick around to watch, because it might be you the smith went to work on with his hammer and anvil. An odd little drawing accompanied the text in the display case. It showed a draped figure raising a hammer over the prostrate form of another man, whose head was being held in a vice. Next to this was an object that looked innocent enough, and was said to have been found near Wayland's smithy. It was like a small portable sundial, but the inscription read, "Witch's Moondial, used on moonlit nights, carved out of human bone. The 7 marks on the face of the dial represent the 7 hours of dread in the witch's vigil." In a glass case opposite, among a collection of local rock samples, Bryony noticed several round chalky stones, of about the same size as the one found in Sylvie's hand. Chalkball, or bollars, found at Windmill Hill, near Lithic. She had thought she was the only visitor in the museum, but now she sensed there was someone just behind her, looking over her shoulder. She turned. There was someone, but he was on the other side of the next row of cases, studying some bones and taking notes in a fat leather book. She went back to reading the labels and began to make notes of her own, unable to get rid of the feeling that he was watching her. Though every time she glanced at him, he seemed completely absorbed in his own business. "It's just nerves," she told herself. After yesterday, no museum would feel like a very safe place. Next time she looked, he wasn't there. He'd moved across to the wall on the other side, so he must have passed right behind her, but she'd heard no footsteps. He was a bulky man, with a mass of thick grey hair, and an authoritative look about him. Perhaps he would know something about the stone, but she was in 2 minds about asking him, and turned her attention to an old hand-drawn map on the wall. It showed the stone circle, with 2 curling avenues leading off from it, like branching antlers stretched over the surrounding hills. One of these paths ended in a further circle of stones, at the sanctuary near the start of the ridgeway. The other came to an abrupt end, an equal distance away, on the left side, after passing through an area marked Devil's Quoits. "Avebury in the early 18th century," said a voice close by. "The drawings by William Stukely." The man had moved right behind her. "Were you looking for information about something in particular?" he asked. Bryony got out one of the photographs again. "I'm trying to find out about this. It was found near here." He studied the picture for a moment, then turned his scrutiny on her. "How much do you know of the history of this place?" "Not a lot, and I'm afraid I don't have a great deal of time to learn it, unless there's something that might throw light on what that stone means." "There's the person who could best do that," he said, indicating a small portrait hanging to one side of the map. Stukely was an impressive man, student of Isaac Newton, but also a respecter of ancient traditions. He was the reviver of the Druid movement and saviour of the Avebury Circle. His arrival here probably rescued the stone formations from complete destruction. At that time, the standing stones were being systematically pulled down and smashed to pieces. Why? A new onset of Christian religious fervour. The stones have come under attack at various periods, but mostly in our own millennium. He smiled, revealing a remarkably good set of teeth. Christians love their devils, you see, and because the circles were pagan, they were regarded as the devil's work. Smashing sarsen stones is a peculiarly English form of witch-hunting. They tortured them, too. In order to crack them open, the demolition men felled them and heated them in pits till they glowed, then threw iced water onto them. One of the greater sarsens keeled over on its tormentor and crushed him to death. Stukely began the process of restoring the standing stones to their places. "You said he revived the Druid movement." The man moved on and stopped a little further along, in front of a picture of a bearded figure in tunic and sandals, with a cloak draped over his head and a stave in his hand. Another of Stukely's drawings. There are some who believe that stones are the eyes of the dead, and this landscape is peopled with the ancient and powerful dead, known as the Old Ones. A seeing eye stone like that one is a means of inducing fear. Legend has it that the Old Ones are attracted to fear. They smell it out. Then that's just the kind of superstition that would have made people hostile to the stone circles. He raised his eyebrows and nodded, then walked around a corner to where there were 3 small framed paintings hung in a recessed section of the wall. They were dark and not well lit, so she had to move very close to make them out. The sleep of reason produces monsters. You've heard of the painter Goya, I suppose? These are by a local imitator. In the centre of all 3 paintings was a figure that seemed to parody the Druid, since it was dressed similarly in sandals, cloak, and tunic. It was strangely elongated, with hooves and a distended goat-like face, but distinctly human eyes. Horns branched from the top of its head, pushing the hood of the cloak back. In the first picture, the creature was standing against a giant stone, as if it had just emerged from inside it, and 2 children were visible in the foreground, apparently running away. The second showed all 3 figures from a greater distance, chasing across the brow of a hill, backlit by a full moon. In the third, the horned beast was standing in a wood, holding in each hand a child suspended by the hair. Bryony was about to ask a question, but the man had quietly moved off back to the display where he'd previously been taking notes. The next time she looked, he was gone. She hurried to see if she could catch him and get his name, but there was no sign of him outside. A patrol car was now parked next to the café, so she walked across to find its occupants. The 2 officers, a woman about her own age, and a man whose deeply lined face marked him definitely as a veteran, were tucking into bowls of soup. She showed her ID, and they introduced themselves as Sergeant Jeffreys and Constable Shipway. "Leek and potato," said Shipway. "Will I get you some? You can have bread or a roll and butter."
"So," said Jeffreys, as Bryony took her seat at the table, "you're the one who phoned up about those missing students from Oxford. The superintendent at Marlborough told us the inquiry's been stepped up. That right?"
"Yes, it has. I'm sure you'll get a proper briefing soon enough. But for now what matters is that we've reason to believe the missing people are in serious danger."
"We've got a description circulated, but it's not much to go on."
Bryony handed him the photograph. "This might be a bit more help. The blonde girl there was killed on Friday night, and her travelling companions haven't been seen since."
"Suspects?"
"Probably not, since they left before it happened. This is the one we're really concerned about." She pointed to Claire. "They were travelling from Oxford in a green Porsche, but were planning to transfer to a white combi when they got here." Jeffreys stirred his soup.
"You know it's the equinox."
"Yes, but which day is that?"
"By the calendar it's the 23rd, but the Druids have their own way of working it out, and they stretch the shenanigans out for most of the week. Means we've got Uncle Tom Cobley and all roaming around the countryside, and no shortage of white vans."
"I know. I saw 2 in the Avery car park just now."
"And do we know exactly where they were going?"
Bryony was about to unfold the map she'd bought when Shipway returned with the soup. "Get that inside you," she said. "Any luck yet with those missing students?" "They're not actually students." "But student types, eh? How well did they know their way round this area?" "This one might have some knowledge." Bryony pointed to Jed.
"People do get lost along the Ridgeway," said Jeffreys, "although you wouldn't expect it, seeing that all they have to do is follow the same track from one landmark to the next. But they get distracted by this and that. They make detours to look at the Sarsons or hunt round for undiscovered barrows. Then a mist comes through, and they don't have the sense to stay put till they can see where they're going."
"Yes, well, my plan is to talk to some people in Avebury first. I want to see what I can learn from those Druids, because one of our missing party apparently took a bit of an interest in Druid ceremonies." Jeffreys chuckled.
"They're harmless enough, those fancy-dress types. Gets a bit rowdy sometimes down at the Red Lion, after they've had a few rounds, but mostly they're just doing their thing, as they say, and as long as they remember to close the gates in the fields, nobody complains much. Matter of fact, they helped us out a bit earlier this year, when we lost a couple of kids from Bishopstone. The Druids sent parties to go on the search with us, all hours. Sadly, we've still not found the 2 girls. 11 years old.
They finished their lunch, cleared the table, and spread the map out. "All we really know," said Bryony, "is that the people we're looking for were starting off at the Uffington Hill fort, then travelling along the ridgeway to Avebury, probably walking most of the way." Shipway interrupted. "Well, if they'd left the van at the hill fort, we'd have found it by now. Stationary vehicles are easy to check on. We checked 4 white vans this morning in this area, including 1 combi, but we managed to connect all of them to groups of people nearby. The White Horse Hill's about 20 miles east of here. You could do the walk over 2 days easy." They were going to some kind of woodland or copse in the area of the White Horse Hill. Any ideas? "Uffington Wood's closest," said Shipway. "But nobody much goes in there except the shooters. There's more trees on the other side of the road, opposite the manger. Then there's the woods around Hardwell Camp Fort, where people camp occasionally, and a string of wooded areas further along this way, towards Wayland's Smithy." "Looks as if I should do some exploring on foot." "Not on your own, I hope." "I've got a DC with me, and an adventurous witness who'll probably insist on coming. She's a friend of the girl."
"Well, we'll cruise by a bit later in the day, see how you're getting on."
Jeffries checked his watch.
"I wouldn't plan on being out much after 5, though. Make sure you've got plenty of daylight. We don't want you added to the missing persons list."
"And if you're going up on the ridgeway, you'll need more clothes on," said Shipway. "We keep some extra woolies in the back of the car. Weather changes all the time round here, so you've got to be prepared." Chapter 17. Walking back through the village to the Red Lion, which was on the main road, Bryony passed costumed people drifting in 2s and 3s in different directions. There was something about these movements that was unsettled and unsettling. Perhaps she was just projecting her own heightened nervous awareness. When she opened the door of the Red Lion, though, the mood was rollicking. The lounge bar was packed, and the members of the company were singing to the accompaniment of bongo drums and a couple of guitars. "I'll sing you 6, so green grow the rushes, so what are your 6, so 6 for the 6 proud walkers, 5 for the symbol at your door, 4 for the 4 wind makers, 3, 3 the rivals, 2, 2 the lily-white boys, clothed all in green, oh, 1 is 1 and all alone, and never more shall be so." Hannah was in the midst of them, clapping the rhythm, and Elsingham was watching from the sidelines at a small table in the corner, beside the ancient stone well that was one of the pub's claims to fame. It was covered with a sheet of glass in a brass ring, inscribed 86 foot deep, and believed to be the last resting place of at least one unfortunate visitor. "Oh, good clean fun, eh?" said Elsingham, as Bryony sat down with her half-pint of coke. "I heard a rumour you can sing a bit yourself." "You hear a lot of rumours, don't you, Elsingham? And most of them are completely without foundation." He shook his head emphatically.
Not this one. Got eyewitnesses who saw you at the Christmas party singing Smackwater Jack."
Bryony almost choked on her drink. "Give us a break. That was the Vine Street party. None of the Oxford police were even there."
Elsingham tapped the side of his nose. "I've got my sources."
The counting song, which mounted to 12-0, finished at last. Hannah had latched on to a man with long curly hair in a striped blanket cape and brought him over to their table. "This is Tom. He's an What is it you are again?"
"An ovate." "Finished auditioning for Fairport Convention, then?" Elsingham quipped. "Steel Eye Span's more in my line," said Tom. "Your friend's not a bad singer." Hannah gave a mock-modest shrug. "Gee, thanks. Do I get a free lunch?" Elsingham obligingly went to buy pies and lager, while Bryony moved seats so she could be more among the company. They were men and women in more or less equal numbers, 12 altogether. "Do you always have the right numbers for the song you're singing?" she asked. "More like the right song for the numbers," said a girl who had feathers plaited into her hair. "We'd have been 15, but Wade had to go over to Uffington Fort, and the other 2 are looking for Sean. Heard you're looking for someone, too." Bryony produced the photograph, which they passed round,
making an assortment of comments. Two of them thought they recognised the man in the sea-green parka. "It's not a parka," said Hannah scornfully. "That's an anorak."
"I think he was here at the summer solstice," said one of the men. "I've seen him a couple of times before that as well, just standing round watching."
But the image of Claire attracted much more interest. There was a general view that, with hair like that, she ought to be a druid. "She's not someone you'd forget easily, is she? What a stunner!"
"That's true auburn hair, sign of direct Celtic lineage. She's got to be a druid."
"You're a Celt," said Tom, suddenly turning to Bryony. "Got Celtic eyes." "Well, don't expect me to join the druids," she laughed. "I'm a skeptic." Tom wagged a finger. "Lot of people say that, but they don't know, that's all." "If you're a skeptic," said one of the women, gesticulating with hands that were laden with heavy silver rings, "tell me this. Why do people always go missing at Mabon? I mean, Sean's missing, these two are missing, and Mabon's tonight. Are you going to tell me that's a coincidence?" "Sorry," said Bryony. "I don't follow you. What's Mabon?" "Mabon's the festival, same time as the autumn equinox."
"It's named after the Welsh god Mabon, the son of Queen Mordred," explained Tom. "The story is he was kidnapped when he was a little kid. In some versions he's found by King Arthur, but some people think he was never found. It's a funny thing, though. People do sometimes go missing at this time of year."
"Not just at this time. What about those two little girls from Bishopstone in May at Beltane?" said another woman. "They never found them, did they?"
"I don't think Sean's missing," said Tom. "He's just gone AWOL. Probably taken a hit of something. And your friends might not really be missing either. Have you thought of that? They might have decided to stay on for the festival. Lots of people do."
"Where is it?" asked Bryony.
"Wayland's smithy, at sunset."
Elsingham came back with 2 glasses of beer and passed one to Hannah.
"They don't have any lager. That's best local keg. Pie and peas coming in a minute. Cheers."
Hannah took a gulp and made a face.
"I can never get over how you lot drink warm beer."
"You should be drinking wine anyway," said Tom. "Mabon's the harvest festival. You're supposed to drink red wine." He raised his glass. "Lost and found, ending and beginning."
"So what happens at this festival?" said Hannah.
"Mabon's when the worlds of the living and the dead come close. So before it begins, we visit the other long barrows, to leave an apple at the mouth of the tomb. Then we go to Wayland's, which is one of the entrances to the world of the dead, and we invite them to come."
"They can dance with us," said a young woman with plaited hair. "But you have to be careful to say goodbye to them at the end, so they go back to their places."
The man in the tartan jacket shook his head.
"Most of us are more interested in the living. It's the harvest festival too, don't forget. Anyway," he got up, "should get going. Don't worry about your friends. They'll turn up. Sean'll turn up. He always does. It's just the vibe's a bit weird this year. Wade said that. He's going to try and settle them down."
The others followed him out, but Tom stayed where he was.
"Wade told me to wait here," he said, "in case Sean makes an appearance. But I don't think he will. My guess is he's gone up to Barbary Castle, but we've got people looking up there."
"What's at Barbary Castle?"
"It's another of the hill forts. People camp there sometimes."
Elsingham looked pleased with himself.
"Girl at the bar says she knows Adrian."
"Adrian?" Tom cut in. "Is Adrian mixed up in this?"
"Somebody called Adrian was supposed to be meeting them here," said Hannah.
Tom looked alarmed. "If it's the Adrian I know, he's a screwball. Cocaine addict. Talks like he's having an argument with himself. Wade tried to help him, but he's too far gone."
"Can you describe him?" said Bryony.
"Tall bloke. 6'4" at least. Skinny. Pulls his hair up to the top of his head and binds it with a leather thong."
"Is he dangerous?"
"Put it this way. I wouldn't go night walking with him. As I said, he's a screwball. I saw him in a rage once, and it wasn't a pretty sight."
Tom drained his glass and sat back, but Hannah was all animation.
"So what happened? Tell us. It's my friend who's out in the middle of nowhere with him."
"We can't be sure of that," said Bryony, trying to sound calm. We've got no description of the Adrian they were meeting.
Tell,
Hannah ordered Tom.
I doubt he'd hurt humans. Mostly it just tags along behind everyone else, stares ahead as if he's not really with it at all. But then if something gets to him, he just goes berserk. The time I saw him really lose it, he was attacking trees. It was when we were camping in the parking area by Silbury Hill. I went with him to get some water from the river. He tripped over a tree root, and the water can went flying. I thought it was funny at first, so I suppose that might have helped set him off. He got up, as if he wasn't going to react at all. Then he just pulled his belt off and started lashing at the tree trunk, yelling and screaming at it till its bark was all ripped away.
When was the last time you saw him? Said Bryony.
I'm trying to think. A few months ago, at least. Wade might have seen him since.
Where do we find Wade?
He's gone over to the hill fort at Uffington.
Very instructive, said Elsingham. I always thought druids wore white sheets and acted like a bunch of ghosts moaning around in the dark. That lot seemed to have quite a sort of normal side to them, really. Bryony was in the passenger seat combing her hair, which had blown all over the place in the wind as they came out of the pub. There was nothing for it but to trap it under the ridiculous striped knitted cap she'd found among the things Constable Shipway had given them. "Don't you dare comment on this, all right?" she said, as she jammed it over her head and pulled it to one side so it didn't look quite as much like a tea cosy. Then she inspected the long scarf that went with it. "No comment," said Hannah from the back seat. "Just keep your mind on the druids. So if it was instructive, what did you learn?"
"They're from all over England. Taunton, Dover, Aberystwyth, Manchester, Bristol."
"Aberystwyth isn't in England," huffed Bryony. "My grandfather would turn in his grave if he heard you say that." "You Welsh, are you?" asked Hannah. "With a name like Bryony Williams, what do you think? So what do you make of all that about the equinox?" The question was addressed to Elsingham, but Hannah interjected before he could answer. "What I'm trying to figure out is, if the equinox isn't till tonight, how come Jed got the timing wrong?" Bryony turned round in her seat. "Seems they've got more than one date for it. But could Claire have had some other plan that she didn't tell you about?" "Nah, she'd never have missed that magazine interview. I bet people do go AWOL sometimes in these parts, but that's not Claire." The rain had been light and intermittent so far, but was now teeming down steadily, so Elsingham had to lean forward to see through the windscreen.
"Did they give us any rain gear?" he asked.
Bryony rummaged through the bag. 2 grey plastic macks, 2 striped jerseys, ditto scarves, and another woolly hat like this one, Tweedledum and Tweedledee.
"No one wears clothes like that anymore."
"I don't think they're into fashion round here, Elsingham. This is sheepskin jacket territory." She looked at her watch. 2:45. Sunset's at about 6, isn't it?
"Officially," said Elsingham. "But I bet it gets dark a lot earlier in these parts."
"Official sunset's surely what's going to count with the druids. That means I'm double booked for 6 o'clock. Don't fancy giving my apologies to Macready." As they approached Uffington, they were overtaken by a group of motorbike riders, armed against the darkening weather with goggles and leather suits.
"There's trouble," muttered Elsingham.
"And that's stereotyping," Hannah retorted. "How do you know the bad guy isn't someone in a suit?"
Uffington Wood spread up the slopes behind some farm buildings, skirting the strangely shaped mound of Dragon Hill. Bryony told the others to stay in the car while she consulted the people in the farmhouse. They'd seen no one around recently, but the farmer promised to keep a lookout, and, since he must know the area better than anyone, it was a start. The lie of the land here was extraordinary, Bryony thought, as she headed back to the car. The rain was easing a bit, and there were patches of light breaking over the dramatic rise of the White Horse Hill, beneath which was the circular dip known as the Manger. It was as if someone had scooped out the earth with a giant spoon. Somehow the whole arrangement looked more like the work of man than of nature, but that was surely impossible. "OK," she said, diving back into the car. "Up the hill." From the plateau at the top, the spectacular panoramic view across the vale was interrupted by rolling waves of dense white mist. To the east, where the sky was clearing, Isolated beams of sunlight picked out a circle of fields and left the others in purple shadow. There was absolutely nothing in sight to tell that they were in the 20th century. Even the makeshift tents pitched inside the ramparts of the hill fort wouldn't have been out of place in a world where human civilization revolved around open fires and wooden buildings. A lone figure that most definitely belonged in such a world stood on the far side of the ramparts, looking out. His broad back was draped in a heavy cloak that bore the image of a great tree, and the wind spread his dark, wiry hair in all directions. Wade turned to watch them approaching, and as they got closer, Bryony could see that he was smiling broadly.
"I'm wondering," he said, "what brought you three together? Somehow you don't look quite as if you belong in company."
Hannah, who had taken the lead in the walk across the fort, was ready with an answer.
"We're looking for some lost people. Maybe they didn't belong in company either. One of them is a friend of mine, and I'm pretty worried about her."
He studied the photograph she handed to him, taking some time over it.
"I wouldn't say they were so ill-sorted," he said, "apart from this one."
He pointed to Sylvie.
Hannah gave an awkward little shrug. "Well, she's not one of the ones we're looking for, as a matter of fact. But they had another bloke with them who's not in the picture. Name of Adrian?"
"Name of Adrian. Not such a common name. Tell me some more about him."
"All we know is that Adrian was going with them, and he drives a white combi van. Tom says you might know where he hangs out."
"How do we know we're talking about the same person? If I see the Adrian I know, I'll be sure to ask him about your friends. What were they doing here, anyway?"
"It's a long story," said Bryony. "The original intention was to put something back where it came from. A carved stone that was found somewhere near here."
"What kind of carved stone?"
"Chalk, with flint inside. About the size of the palm of my hand. It had an eye carved into it, and some words. Have you ever seen anything like that?"
Wade walked in silence for a while, and Bryony began to think he simply wasn't going to give her an answer. But then he stopped and looked out over the hillside. "If you watch the sheep out here, sometimes for a whole day a sheep will go over the same few feet of ground, working its way through, so that it hardly seems to move at all. See a flock of them as you walk along, and you'd think they were completely still, like stones. You know they call the sarsen stones wethers, because from a distance you can't tell the difference between a scatter of sarsens and the grazing sheep. There's nothing as still as stones. But they move sometimes."
Wade turned and resumed the walk.
"Which way are you going?"
"To Wayland's smithy," said Bryony. "Can you point us in the right direction?"
"If you're sure that's the right destination for you, I can put you in the way of it, yes."
Bryony was starting to find this inquisitorial style a bit irritating. "Why wouldn't it be right?" she countered.
"Not always a safe place, Wayland's. There's very strong energies."
"There's a legend, isn't there? I read something about it in the museum."
"Oh, yes. There's a cult around Wayland the Smith. In some of the stories he's a violent character. He cuts heads off or crushes them. You might have seen a picture of that in the museum, too."
"And the Druids take an interest in stories like that?" She tried to make the question sound like idle curiosity.
"We take an interest in all the stories. But don't go getting the wrong idea. To Druids, all the Long Barrows are places of peace. If you treat them like that, that's the energy they give back to you. Maybe I'd better take you over there."
He led them down onto a track that threaded off into the distance between the hedgerows, setting a brisk pace and keeping several yards ahead of them. Elsingham walked beside Bryony, hunching his shoulders in the oversized mac. He was obviously fighting to stop his teeth chattering, but that didn't prevent him launching into a monologue.
"What I always wonder is, you know, with these prehistoric types of places, is how they manage to live with the cold. I mean, when you look at us now, we've got scarves and hats and socks to fill in all the gaps in our clothing, you know, to stop the wind blowing right through us, and yet we're shivering, and it isn't even winter yet. Imagine, I mean, all they had was a few skins stitched together, and no proper shoes, just sandal-type things tied onto their bare feet. With this wind just a few degrees colder, it'd be enough to freeze your bollocks off. I mean, where would you go to get out of it?
You could get into a barrow, said Hannah. I reckon it's the best shelter there is. Better than a barn.
Elsingham laughed dryly. Thought barrows were for dead people. You'd have to be dead to get out of the bloody freezing rain and wind.
The hedgerows were overgrown and tangled with brambles, so it was hard to get a sense of the surrounding countryside, except when they passed a gateway into a field. Bryony stopped at one of these, taken with the extraordinary effect of the purple sky juxtaposed with the emerald hillside. It was as if the light was being thrown from under the earth. "Weird," said Hannah, coming up behind her. "You get weird lights in the bush in Australia, but this is just full on, you know." As the slope levelled out, they came to a crossing of the paths, with a wooden signpost pointing to Wayland's smithy, among the trees up ahead. Wade had stopped there and was waiting for them to catch up.
"See," he said, "a wood where no wood should be."
"Why?" asked Hannah. "There's woods all over the place. Why shouldn't there be one here?"
"Because it's artificial. Planted. These are beech trees. If you look at old pictures of the place, it's fir trees, and its dimensions keep changing. See, it's got bigger by a long shot than they show on that map of yours. The barrow's at the western end of it there, with the sarsen stones around the mouth of it. When the sun gets low, the rays strike level with them, and they light up. At the equinox, the light cuts through right to the heart of the chamber. That's what people come for."
"Then they're going to be disappointed, aren't they?" said Hannah. "No sun, no show."
"That's where you're wrong. The sun's masked by those clouds, but in half an hour or so it'll sink below them. Then you'll see."
Elsingham did a tour of inspection round the earth mound, but Hannah was making for the trees. "I reckon this could be it. This could be where they were going. I mean, it's the sort of place you just wander into, isn't it?" Bryony could see she was about to demonstrate, and went to follow, but it proved to be a challenge. Hannah was moving deftly around the tree trunks and kept slipping out of sight. The light was broken up by the leaves overhead, and there was a thick covering of leaves on the ground, so she sank to her ankles with each step. She called for Hannah to stop, but Hannah's own voice suddenly rang out, louder and more urgent. "Clear! Hey, clear!" Through the chaos of swaying orange leaves, Bryony saw, or thought she saw, a woman with long auburn hair. For a second the figure turned and looked at them, then was gone. Hannah was sprinting after it, and mustering all her strength, Bryony made a dash to catch up, crashing through the mess of branches. They chased around the perimeters, slowing to a walk as they made their way in among the trees again, where Bryony found a large stone and sat to get her breath back. Then a change of light caught some of the russet leaves a few yards away, and Hannah was off again, so she had to follow. In the last charge, Hannah turned her ankle as she missed her footing against a stone on the ground and went down heavily in the wet leaves with a yell of pain and exasperation. Bryony grabbed her elbow to help her up. "If Claire's here, we'll find her. But are you sure it was her?" "Of course I'm bloody sure. No one looks like Claire." "But she must have seen you. If it was Claire, she would have answered when you called out." Wade had come up and was studying them with apparent amusement.
"People see all kinds of things in this wood. It's notorious. Tricks of the light."
Still staring at Bryony, Hannah ignored him.
"You saw her too, didn't you?"
"I thought I did. More to the point, I thought she saw us."
"Fan-bloody-tastic. So we're all going round the twist together in the crazy English woods. What now?"
Hannah was brushing dead leaves off her jeans.
"Yuck, what's that?"
Her hand came away with streaks of red-brown across the palm, and in the same instant Bryony registered something on the ground that was not an optical illusion, and that instantly brought out the police officer in her. "Stand back," she commanded, holding out her arm as a cordon. She crouched down. Something strangely angled, neither a twig nor a root, was jutting out among the leaves where Hannah had sat. It was a hand, a small human hand, with stiffly bent fingers attached to an arm that was blackened by the earth. Nearby, long strands of hair were mingled with the leaf mould. Chapter 18. As the last of the light faded, a crowd of some 50 people were gathered near the crossroads, staring at the activity on the other side of the cordon. Police cars blocked off the ridgeway at either end of the wood surrounding Wayland's smithy, and lined the road leading back to Knight and Coombs. Most of the police were around the edges of the cordon and doing their best to turn away onlookers who were blocking the path of the ambulance churning its way along the unsurfaced road. Macready had arrived 10 minutes ago, but had already been directing the operation by radio on his way down. Every qualified socco within 20 miles had been called in. Their torches made wavering tracks of light among the trees. Bryony's mouth was dry, and her jaw was clamped with tension, whether from the cold or from the general stress she couldn't tell. Someone had thrown a blanket over her shoulders, and a newly arrived sergeant, mistaking her for a druid, had officiously tried to move her out of the way. 2 bodies had been found, both heavily decomposed. A canopy of plastic sheeting had been rigged over the area where the discovery had been made, but more was needed. She edged closer to where the soccos were working, trying to pick up on the fragments of conversation between them. There was talk about getting a generator.
With all this leaf mould, risk is you tread on something before you've seen it. These beams just aren't powerful enough.
We could wait till daylight, but we're going to need extra light in here anyway. Floodlights, preferably.
They might have some at the town hall in Wantage.
But we can't make the best judgment about where to rig them, not in these circumstances.
Pavan was on his way, but wasn't expected for half an hour. Someone was going to have to decide how far the search should go tonight. The onlookers, equipped with an assortment of torches, brooms and rakes, were waiting in case they were needed. She made her way over to Macready.
"I think we should send that lot away, sir. We don't want them going through the wood, and there's no point in searching the surrounding land before daylight."
Macready waved a hand.
"Quite right, Williams. Send them home to their beds if they have any. And I would say the same to you. You can do no more here at present."
She expected this advice, and was ready with a diversion. "The soccos are talking about bringing in a generator."
"I dare say they are. And a collection of floodlights, no doubt. Why do the delicate work of following your senses when you could be rigging up a lot of noisy equipment? Come on, we'd better give them some instruction."
Macready had no intention of exchanging his hand-stitched brogues for the rubber boots worn by the socco team, and ignoring the entry line that they had painstakingly cleared to the site, he marched straight across the unexamined ground. After speaking to the bystanders and persuading them to make a reluctant departure, Bryony followed him. So far the excavation of the 2 bodies had revealed that they were lying in shallow graves, dug between the roots of one of the larger trees. Macready stood looking down at them, then pointed his torch ahead to the tree trunk and trained the beam upwards.
"This is the largest tree here, and the oldest." He swung the beam back to the ground. "And these are quite small bodies. You see that they are placed between the smaller lines of root growth. Perhaps, gentlemen, you would do better to confine your attention to the root lines of this tree. If there are more graves, the likelihood is that they're similarly placed around it."
Bryony could see his point. The bigger roots to the left of the tree rose high out of the ground and made natural sides for a grave. The leaves, too, were piled higher around the tree trunk. Anyone walking through would be unlikely to pass near it. A new level of concentration set in as the men worked in silence under Macready's gaze. When the heel of a naked foot was uncovered, it was as if everyone had been expecting it. This body was larger than the other 2, fresher, and, at least as far as they could see, fully intact. An adult male. He was lying on his front, the pelvis pressed flat between the tree roots, and the shoulders turned slightly at an angle, wedged between the steeper blades of the roots, close to the trunk. "There's no room for the head," thought Bryony. The photographer's flash went off, highlighting a soiled hand twisted awkwardly behind the body. The fabric of a T-shirt, heavily soaked with blood, near the place where the head should have been, but where instead There was only a sickening mess. Pavan arrived in time to oversee the rest of the excavation.
"There's no mystery about the murder weapons," he said. "They're what we've seen before, and they're all around us."
He picked up a large, jagged rock, the kind Bryony had seen in the field a few hours ago, and handed it to Macready.
"We'll have to examine every piece, of course, but that's a job to be done in the daylight. I rather think we should get this recent victim to the morgue without delay. There's very little sign of decomposition, and if we get the autopsy underway first thing tomorrow, we may be able to get some idea of the time of death. Identification is going to be a problem. But again, the sooner we can be prepared for that, the better."
It was nearly midnight when Bryony was persuaded to leave the murder site and go to the room that Constable Shipway had arranged for her at one of the pubs nearby. Hannah had been taken back there hours ago, but Elsingham, with a cheery patience Bryony was coming to admire, had returned to wait for her. "Don't suppose you thought to buy a couple of toothbrushes?" she asked.
"'Fraid not. But Constable Shipway's insisted on lending you a dressing gown."
Bryony did an exaggerated slide down into the seat. "Oh, great." The dressing gown was pink, and clashed a treat with the orange candlewick bedspread in her room. Brown and orange flowers danced across the wallpaper, bloomed luridly on the curtains, and repeated themselves on the square of old carpet next to the bed. She took her glasses off to reduce the impact, and sat on the mattress for a moment, registering the lack of bounce. Could she really sleep in a place like this, when Claire Belmont was roaming about in the domain of a crazed killer? When Macready, Pavan and their team were out there digging systematically through what seemed to be a whole field of death? "Bones and stones," chanted a voice in Bryony's head. "I'll sing you 4-0, green grow the rushes, oh, sticks and stones can break my bones. I'll sing you 5-0, and still counting. She moved to the dressing table and pulled at her tangled hair with the comb in her handbag. In the faded and mottled surface of the mirror, the face staring back at her looked somehow unfamiliar. "Get a haircut, Bryony," she murmured. "A good, sharp, glossy cut, at the best place in Oxford, even if it costs you 30 quid. Stake your claim to the modern world. Room like this could put a spell on you, suck you back into the past." She felt tacky and uncomfortable, and not in the least like getting into the oversized bed. Bath. They had to have a bathroom here at least. Taking the limp towel from the end of the bed, she locked her room and went out into the hallway where a dim bulb shrouded by a waxy old lampshade provided the only light. Everyone else in the place was probably fast asleep. In the bathroom, she was pleased to discover that the hot water system was really quite efficient, and that there was a new cake of lavender-scented soap by the tub. She lay and soaked for 20 minutes, watching the steam rise towards the ceiling. By the time she got back to her room, she was so sleepy that she hardly noticed the lurid colour scheme, or the pilled flannelette sheets, or the fizzing of the lamp as she switched it off. In her dream, she was following a slim blonde-haired girl down a road that twisted and turned so she could not see far ahead. A company of people straggled along behind, all dressed in sheets and blankets and candlewick bedspreads, with towels around their heads and rubber boots on their feet. One of them was Nash. He was calling to her, his mouth distorted with his efforts to shout, but she couldn't hear him. He held out his broken, bloodied spectacles to show her, but she couldn't stop to look. There was somewhere she had to go, something she had to find out. Now she had lost sight of the girl and was gradually realizing that she had no idea where they were all going. She was looking out for a gateway or crossroads, anything to break up the increasingly tunnel-like look of the road, because the hedgerows were now so high they met over her head, blocking out the light. So she walked on in darkness, hearing voices around her but unable to tell what they were saying. Just as she was beginning to think the tunnel was endless, she came across a broad wooden gate leading into a garden, the garden she had played in as a little girl. And there was the swing, with its bright yellow seat, swaying gently backwards and forwards. She stood and watched as splashes of crimson rain hit the yellow plastic. "No!" she tried to shout, but the blood went on splashing until it was pouring over the edges of the seat, and now the swing was in the middle of Nash's office at the Pitt Rivers Museum. He sat on the seat, looking at her through the ruined spectacles and trying to hold his head together with his hands, but it was coming apart, and so was his face even as he spoke. "There's a visitor," he kept saying. "There's a visitor." Then, with an odd little flicker, the light went on, and she was sitting up in the bed in the hotel room, and there was someone else in the room with her, standing at the foot of the bed, staring at her with a steady, malignant gaze. A woman with long red hair, parted in the centre over the stretched lines of her pale face. Bryony opened her mouth to shout in terror, but only a strangled squawk came out, which woke her up. And there she was, sitting bolt upright in the strange bed, in the dark, her heart thudding violently. She switched the light on. The room was empty. It was cold, bitterly cold, but empty. What was it Claire said in her diary? Dreaming that you've woken up, it's always the beginning of something coming through. What the hell did she mean by that? With the dressing-gown pulled around her, Bryony began a systematic check, under the bed, behind the curtains, in the wardrobe. The window was closed and the door was locked. Well, nightmares never lacked for a way to get in. The thing was to stop them coming back. She sat on the edge of the bed, hunched over, massaging the back of her head, as if to try to erase the images that had invaded it. Chapter 19. Friday, 26th September, 1974. Bryony woke just after 7 and decided to take a short walk before breakfast. More than anything, she needed to be in the sunlight. Stepping outside into the main street of the village, she was passed by 2 women in headscarves, hurrying forward with large bags over their arms. It was too early for shopping, so they had to be going to work. A window cleaner was getting out his ladder across the street, and the milkman's van was rattling into view. Work. When you were in the heat of a case, you stopped seeing it as work. An unaccustomed thought struck her. What would it be like to have nothing to do this morning but be a tourist? Take pictures, go on a hike, look around the gift shops, drink coffee. What would it be like to have someone to do that with? Gareth, for example. Someone who came up with unexpected ideas about where to go and what to talk about. But already another voice in her head was going through a different set of questions. How many bodies had they found last night? The search would be underway again by now. When she got back to the hotel, the smell of frying bacon reminded her that she hadn't eaten since yesterday lunchtime, and despite everything, she was hungry. She knew that if she didn't eat something substantial, she was liable to conk out, as she had done a couple of times at embarrassingly critical moments in her first year of working for Macready. Elsingham was sitting on his own in the little dining room, hoeing into a plate loaded with fried bread, tomato and sausages. Bryony ordered boiled eggs and orange juice. "Hannah hasn't surfaced yet." "Haven't seen her. Did you sleep all right?" "Gotta be kidding," Bryony said. "Why did they pick this place?" "Breakfast's all right," he gestured with his fork. "Very good. But I don't know how you can eat boiled eggs. They make me constipated." "Hannah doesn't know about the horror show at the Pitt Rivers, does she?" "No." "Glad I didn't see it. In a way. I suppose it's all experience, isn't it? But seeing the look on Sergeant Canning's face when he got back from there, I thought, no, I'm best off out of it. And now we've got another similar, by what I was hearing up there last night." "That's the way it looks. But don't go around talking about the Pitt Rivers case. We might find out discreetly whereabouts this person or that person might have been on Tuesday night. The Druids especially." "Most of them came down here Tuesday." "That's what they told me in the pub." "Well, that's the sort of thing we need to learn. But generally, we'll find out more if we keep the background info to a minimum." "Why's that, then?" "Standard practice. In a murder case, you keep some of the details under wraps. All sorts of reasons, like sorting out fake confessions, catching people out because they know something that hasn't gone public yet. If anyone around here says anything about the Pitt Rivers murders, you let me know, all right?
But it'll be in the papers.
You can bet there'll be nothing in the papers that would link what happened up there with what we're investigating down here. Macready's one for releasing as little information as possible to the press.
But we got more than one case here, haven't we? I was talking to some of the Wiltshire coppers last night. Those 2 girls who went missing, the ones we probably found. People used to think they were twins, because they looked alike for some reason. Glad I don't have the job of going to see the families today.
Hannah appeared with a towel round her shoulders and wet hair.
Is there nowhere in this country where they've heard of showers? Can't stand those bloody old bathtubs.
Bryony put the menu in front of her. Have some breakfast.
No way, I never eat in the morning.
Hannah sat with her elbows on the table, shoulders hunched, while Bryony poured her a cup of tea. Here, drink this. Helps unscramble the brain cells. I know you've had a shock.
Bloody oath. How many more am I in for?
None, if I can possibly help it. Will you please go back to Oxford? Or to your flat in London, where we can give you proper police protection?
No way.
I thought you'd say that. You know you could be in real danger, don't you? Hannah gulped down the tea.
Yuck, that's cold, and it's weak as piss. Look, if this psycho was after me, he'd have got me by now. I'm not cut out to be a victim.
That's a nice, cosy illusion too many people have, Hannah. Be realistic.
You get real. You can't stop stuff happening, can you? I've heard about that police protection crap. A friend of mine in Sydney got beaten up within an inch of his life while he was under police protection, and it was the cops who did it. You know something?
The green eyes fixed on Bryony.
You need me.
Bryony let out an exasperated sigh, but this only fueled Hannah's outburst.
You need me because I think different, and I act different.
She's got a point there, said Elsingham.
Bryony got up. I have to make some phone calls. She met Hannah's eye. If you're coming with us, be ready to leave in 20 minutes. Twins. The murdered girls looked like twins. Elsingham's chatter had rung a bell that was setting all her nerves on edge. The Gleeson boys should be interviewed, given what Donnelly had said about Sylvie finding the stone. The boys had been with her on the day she found it. They might know something. She called Canterbury Road and got on to Canning.
They're still scraping the walls over at the Pitt Rivers, he said. Everything has to be kept in place now, doesn't it? I just wish they'd let them clean up in there. I suppose Gleeson's off the suspect list.
No one's off the suspect list unless Macready says so. We don't know how many people we might be dealing with. We found another murder site here.
What? Same kind of job?
From what we can tell so far. I need some more information from the Gleesons, as a matter of fact. Talk to the 2 boys. Seems they made a visit to the Uffington White Horse a few months ago, with Sylvie and their father. That's become important. We have to know exactly when, and I need to know what happened. Get the story from the boys first, in case Gleeson tries to interfere with what they tell you. Their mother didn't want us to talk to them before, so she might be obstructive. But there's no argument about it now. Ask them if they remember going up the hill, and where else they might have been in the area. Could you do that this morning?
Should be able to. It's a quick run out to Woodstock this time of the morning, because the traffic's all going the other way.
Tops! Then we're not going to school.
Miles had already ripped off his tie and was swinging it around above his head.
Of course you're going to school. Just stop that, will you? The police will be here soon, and I don't suppose they'll want to talk to you for long. You can catch the 10 o'clock bus. Oh, why? Do we have to? Anyway, it's not worth it. It'll be after break before we get there, and then there's nothing but a double period of geography before lunchtime.
The word geography was spoken as if it were the name for a bad smell.
I said you'll catch the 10 o'clock bus, and that's final. Daniel, what are you doing?
Daniel was tipping his chair back at an extreme angle, lowering it slowly so that he could hold the weight with his fingertips under the rim of the table. He rocked back into position with a resounding thud.
I haven't done my homework, which means I'll get a detention, And then I'll miss the bus home and you'll have to drive into Oxford and fetch me. All for the sake of a useless, boring geography lesson with a useless, boring teacher.
Why haven't you done your homework? You told me last night it was finished.
I thought it was, but then I remembered some more.
I've got a good mind to stop your pocket money, both of you. You're impossible. Angela Gleeson put her hands to her forehead and smoothed them outwards over her face, then sat down and poured another cup of tea.
Anyway,
said Miles, sawing the tie rhythmically across the back of his neck.
When are we going home? We don't like it here. It's boring.
You think everything's boring.
Well, it is.
Miles threw his head back, looked at the ceiling, and pulled at the edges of the tie.
One day we'll just die of boredom and the police will come and find our dead bodies lying on the floor like Sylvie.
You're not to talk like that. Just shut up for 5 minutes, can't you? Said their mother. Just for 5 minutes, please. There was about 10 seconds of complete silence, followed by an explosion of giggles. Then, mercifully, the doorbell rang. The boys continued talking in half-whispers while their mother greeted the arrivals in the hallway.
We don't have to go to school, said Daniel. Even if we do catch the bus, we can go home instead and see Toffee. We could see Dad. He might be at work. He might be out shopping for another au pair girl. The murderer might rush in and get us while no one else is there.
Their mother returned with a social smile on her face.
Daniel, Miles, this is Sergeant Canning and Constable Westcott.
Do sit down. You're sure you wouldn't like me to stay? Quite sure, thank you, Mrs. Gleeson. We'll keep the rascals in order. Canning closed the door after her and stood for a moment looking at the two of them. All right, then. So, which one's Miles and which one's Daniel?
I'm Daniel. I'm the oldest, by 15 minutes. He's my little brother.
Miles delivered a covert pinch on the arm, but was not game for any stronger payback in the circumstances. And you two are 8 years old, that right?
8 1/4, said Miles.
Well, I expect two smart young lads like you would have pretty good memories, eh? He sat down. We need to have a proper serious discussion. Constable Westcott's going to write down what you say, see? That's how important it is. Now, cast your minds back. Do you remember being taken down to Uffington to see the White Horse?
Of course we do,
said Daniel, sitting up straight and speaking like an adult.
We went up to the hill fort, and Sylvie got lost.
The sergeant focused on Miles. Really? How was that, then? Miles smirked.
Her jeans were too tight. She tried to follow us up the hill, but she got left behind because she couldn't run properly. And then we went along the ridgeway and she got lost. But not for long, Daniel corrected him. She came back about an hour after we did. She was crying. She was crying like a baby, like this.
Miles demonstrated a succession of heaving breaths.
Something happened to her. Nothing really happened. She saw something in the woods and she got the scares, that's all. But we saw it as well, and we weren't scared. It was just a man chopping wood.
Daniel's spine lengthened as he said this, so that he was sitting bolt upright, with a very straight face to match. But the speech had the opposite effect on Miles, who was caving forward, his gaze dropping to the table in front of him. "Is that right, Miles?" asked the sergeant.
"Yes."
"What did he look like, this man?"
"He was tall," said Daniel.
"Anything else you can remember about him?"
"He had brown eyebrows, a brown moustache, and a broken tooth, and a blue coat on." "He was far away from us," said Miles. "We didn't see him properly, but he saw us, and we ran." "You just didn't look properly," retorted Daniel.
"So let me get this right. You went into this wood, and you saw this man. He had a beard, that right?" Daniel nodded. Canning winked at Westcott. "And a green coat." Another nod. "Then what? Eh, Mr. Daniel? You ran off, did you?"
"We didn't run off. We just had to hurry to get back home, because we wanted to see Doctor Who."
"Oh, yes. It's very good, that, isn't it? My daughters like to watch that. Did you see it last week?"
"No. Miles cut in again. "We're not allowed to watch it here. Auntie Gillian thinks it's rubbish. She thinks it's too noisy."
"I dare say. It's not my sort of programme. So this adventure in the woods, when was this? Do you remember? How long ago?"
"It was on May Day," said Miles. "Mum got up really early to hear her students in the choir. They sing on the top of Magdalen College Tower."
"Oh, yes, I've heard them. Just in passing, mind. Very nice."
"And then she came back to have a sleep, and we went on an expedition with Dad, so he wouldn't disturb her."
He dragged out the last syllable of disturb, squirming in his seat.
"She wanted us to be choristers," said Daniel, "but we can't sing. She says we're tone-deaf like Dad. Are you a real detective, then?"
"I'm a real police officer. Now, I expect you two have got to get yourselves to school, so I don't want to keep you much longer. You said Sylvie came back after you did, and she was crying." He looked pointedly at Miles. "Did she say where she'd been?"
"She said a man came after her. She went down to the woods where we went, and then she was going back along the ridgeway, and she saw him running after her, faster than a speeding bullet."
"Faster than a speeding bullet, eh?"
"But she got away from him."
"Even though she couldn't run properly?"
Daniel looked perplexed and didn't answer. Canning turned the question back to Miles.
"You said she was wearing tight jeans and she couldn't run. So how is it she got away from someone who was faster than a speeding bullet?"
"Don't ask me. It's much easier to run downhill, isn't it? And people can run faster when they're scared," said Daniel. "I read that in a book about the ancient Britons. It's survival instinct."
"Did you see anyone coming after her when you found her?"
"It was getting dark. You could only see this far in front of your face."
Daniel held his hand out at arm's length.
"Anyway," said Miles, "we didn't find her. Dad made us stay in the pub while he and some other people went to look for her. But she came back all on her own."
"Going boo-hoo-hoo,"
Daniel added, demonstrating.
"All right, then. We'll leave it there for today. Now, why don't we give you a lift to the bus stop?"
"Perhaps we could just drop them at the school," said Constable Westcott. "After all, we're going back into Oxford."
"No, thank you," said Daniel. "We have to go on the bus because we've got a Latin test." "We revise our Latin on the bus," said Miles.
Chapter 20. The area round Wayland's smithy was still surrounded in mist when they arrived, and that meant the ground search was delayed. Involving civilians in these conditions would run too high a risk of adding to the list of missing persons. Bryony spotted Shipway and Jeffries and went over to thank them for the overnight arrangements.
"Long as you slept well," said Shipway. "Can't have you driving up and down the motorway at all hours."
Crime scene tape was strung around the edges of the wood, and sheets of plastic radiated out from the trunk of the oak tree to create some cover over the places where the bodies had lain. A team of soccos in overalls was at work close to the ground, using trowels to clear away earth and leaves. Their most recent finds were laid out on a plastic sheet waiting to be bagged for transport to the lab. Much of it looked like what you'd find in the watery bottom of a dustbin: a mangled capstan packet, some empty bottles, half a dozen sodden cigarette butts placed in neat rows like something out of the I Ching. The pieces of bone made a less symmetrical arrangement. These looked old, even to Bryony's unspecialized eye. Their surfaces were porous and deeply ingrained with dirt. Pavan, still managing a kind of elegance in his orange nylon oversuit, came over to greet her. "How come you're still out here?" she asked. "I thought you'd be in the autopsy room."
"The post-mortem work is under the direction of the Home Office pathologist now. You and I are humbled, Bryony, mere workers in the field."
They did a brief tour of the tree, starting at the point where Hannah had encountered the exposed forearm of the first body. Pavan held a compass and referred to a diagram he'd been making.
"We've been marking orientations from the trunk of the tree and numbering the larger roots."
He pointed to the lines of bright pink thread that had been fixed along the knotted contours standing out from the ground.
The whole thing will have to be excavated. We found a skeleton on the southwest side, here.
He led the way round to where 2 sockos were working, at a fork between the roots, about 2 yards from the tree trunk. As they got closer, Bryony could see the outlines of the form, lying on its side, knees drawn up and head tucked into the chest. From where she was standing, the skull looked mercifully complete, but it was more death. She had to admit that some aftershock effect was kicking in from yesterday's discovery. How much brutality had this place seen? "This isn't the same thing at all," she remarked.
Evidently not. To start with, this is buried deeper, and it's been here longer, much longer. The bones have separated from each other, you see. The femur of the leg from the upper side of the pelvis there has fallen into the ground. All the insect activity is round the other side of the tree, where we found the bodies last night. And there are no signs here that the soil's been disturbed. I wouldn't be surprised if we are looking at someone buried well over a century ago.
So there's been something going on here, maybe for a long time, that's spinning outwards. Sylvie finds the stone. She sees something in these woods. Maybe she witnesses one of these killings. Someone traces her back to Oxford, kills her, then starts tracking the people involved in the investigation.
Didn't I tell you to be careful on the first day of this investigation?
Pavan spoke with unaccustomed sharpness, then turned and began stepping around to the other side of the tree. She followed, trying to plant her feet as closely as possible to where he'd put his. The body itself had already been removed, but a square of plastic was pegged out over the place where the head had been. Pavan refrained from showing her what was underneath.
This is slow work. The skull was completely smashed. We'll have to resort to fingerprints and dental records for identification.
Could it be a deliberate attempt to make him unidentifiable?
It's possible. The destruction of the head is more thorough than was the case with the 2 Pitt Rivers victims. I heard this morning they've been positively identified. As we thought, Malcolm Nash and Damien Crouch.
Bryony made her way out into the weakening sunshine, with clots of wet leaves clinging to her shoes. Elsingham was standing on the ridgeway with Wade, the Druid leader, who had left much of his costume behind, and now looked like a stocky, bearded farmer, in a brown jacket and peaked cap. She joined them, and they walked in silence for a while, until a hare loped out of the wood in front of them. Wade stopped to watch it, and it stopped too, raising itself upright, ears pricked, staring back.
"Oi, little brother," said Wade softly. "You're right. That's no place for you in there. Not for now."
The animal dropped back on its forepaws and continued on its way. Bryony had been trying to get Wade's measure. She half wondered if this little show was for her benefit, but it sounded quite genuine. Sergeant Jeffreys, when she asked, had given Wade a pretty good reference, said he was a solid citizen and a member of the local council in Watlington. Real name, Wilfred Bowman. They were level now with the standing stones at the entrance to the long barrow, and she steered the way in towards it. "So how many Druid festivals are there, Mr. Bowman?"
"Nobody calls me that, if you don't mind. Wade's the name I go by, no matter where. To answer your question, there's the 2 equinoxes, 2 solstices, and 4 others. Samhain, Imbolc, Beltane, and Lughnasadh."
"And when are those?"
"Equinoxes are in March and September."
"September 23rd, according to the calendar," Bryony interrupted. "So why do you celebrate on the 25th?
The equinox goes back to times when they didn't have a calendar, only the light and the seasons. We go by the light. If you calculate them properly, the date moves a bit each year. This is late for the September equinox. Solstices are about the 21st of June and 21st of December. The other 4 are the first days of February, May.
1st of May? May Day. 2 little girls went missing on the 1st of May, and now we have a young man killed at the time of the equinox. Bit of a coincidence, don't you think?
In the past 5 years, the festivals have been attracting a lot of people. It's the hippies mainly been the cause of that. Then the bikers started collecting around those times as well. And the cult groups, the crackpots, the types that want to mess about with crop circles. All that put together is a recipe for trouble. It's been worrying me for a while. A lot of the sites are pretty much unprotected, and if things got out of hand, I dread to think of the consequences.
I think we've seen dreadful enough consequences already, said Bryony, trying to stay cool. When do they start, then, these equinox shenanigans?
Not quite the word for them. I start with an all-night vigil here on my own. That's Tuesday night. Wednesday morning, most of the others have arrived, and some of the ceremonies start from there.
What are they about?
When you get the feel of it, there's a rhythm to the cycle of the year. You start to feel the changes of the earth in your bones. City dwellers have lost touch with that feeling, but the ceremonies help to bring it back.
Is that all? He took a couple of steps further in towards the barrow, pointing to a small pile of apples placed in front of one of the sarsen uprights.
I'm glad your friends in the plastic suits left them alone. Equinox is where the 2 sides of the year come to meet each other. Summer and winter, day and night, life and death. Those times are dangerous, because the joints of the world are loose, and the portals are open for the old ones to come through.
Bryony remembered what she'd been told yesterday morning. The old ones are the dead. They're supposed to be powerful, is that right?
Someone been talking to you about that?
Someone I met at the museum in Avebury.
Oh, yes. You want to be careful who you talk to about things like that. My view is that the dead want to rest in peace. Or most of them do, thankfully.
Elsingham had been listening to the conversation and looked deeply puzzled.
But what's the point of the apples? The worms will get them, surely.
Wade smiled.
They surely will. And the worms are the little go-betweens of the vegetable world. They make no distinction between the ripe fruit and rotting flesh. The apples are a gesture of respect to the quiet and the unquiet alike. In a nutshell, that's what our ceremony is, too, a gesture of respect. The right ceremonies can keep things calm, so the transitions of the year happen safely. Not all ceremonies are like that.
So I gather, Bryony said. I saw the witch's moon dial in the museum. Charming little thing. And the story of this place. She placed a hand on the sarsen stone, now warming to a pale gold as some morning sun broke through. It isn't all sweetness and light, is it?
You're thinking about the Wayland stories. This barrow's over 4,500 years old. Stories have come and gone over that time. Who knows its original story?
What about the story of Mabon? Your friends mentioned that yesterday.
Mabon's the son of Mordred. He was kidnapped at the age of 3 and taken to Avalon, the Isle of the Dead. He's supposed to surface at the time of the autumn equinox, like the go-between, connecting the dead with the living, opening the portals between the worlds. And he's got scores to settle, like Wayland. Damaged gods are always bad news.
And you believe this?
I told you before. Belief isn't a word I use. Stories like that are ways of talking about power, and that's real enough.
While they'd been talking, a gathering of druids had formed on the ridgeway behind them, with Hannah in their midst. Are your druids always the same group of people? Bryony asked.
More or less. There's a few who come and go. I thought the druids went to Stonehenge, said Elsingham. You see pictures of them all in white. Different order, different style.
Wade smiled.
They call us the sheets and the blankets. Now, if you don't mind, I need to get along."
Bryony watched him go, then turned to Elsingham. "I'm going to take another look around. Keep an eye on Hannah, will you?" Chapter 21. Angela Gleeson was pleasantly surprised at the good influence Sergeant Canning's visit seemed to have on the boys. They'd gone off to the bus stop with their hair brushed, shoelaces done up, and ties reknotted, and even refrained from protest when she said that if Daniel was kept back in detention, Miles would have to wait for him, so that they could both catch the 5:10 bus home. She waved them off at the front door and watched them tramp down the street in step, chatting to each other. They were good boys, really, she reminded herself, just had a bad time recently.
"Do you think they'll report us to the police for skiving?" asked Miles. "Course not, stupid. Their job is to catch the murderer." "Maybe we could catch him ourselves. We could go back and hide in the house, and then when he came in, we could tie him up." "You are stupid, Miles. You're a complete idiot. How would we do that?" "First, we'd have to make a trap for him. We could put a tripwire across the hallway." "Then what?" "The bus is coming. When we get in the bus, I'll draw a plan."
They sat right at the back, where Miles sketched on page after page, while Daniel knelt and looked out of the rear window. Absorbed in his work, Miles started a commentary.
"Toffee's asleep in the shed. Then, through the window, you can see Dad looking out into the garden. He's wondering when we're coming home, because he's all on his own in a great big house, and he doesn't like watching television, and all the whiskey's finished."
There were some more rapid strokes of the pencil.
"That's the empty whiskey bottle. And the wine's finished as well. And there's nothing left to eat except biscuits and dog food. Now, this is the murderer coming through the door with the butcher's knife, all dripping blood." "It would be dripping blood after the murder, you twerp," said Daniel, "not before." "No, because look."
Miles held up his exercise book.
"He's been killing people all along the street. The gutters are running with blood, like in the French Revolution." "That was because of the guillotine. When you cut the heads off, the bodies spurt out blood like a fire hose. They don't do that just because they're stabbed." "Anyway, we can't go to school now," said Miles, "because I've got murder drawings all over my geography book. I'll get a detention as well."
When the bus stopped outside the school, it seemed to stay there for ages, as if they were being given extra time to change their minds. Daniel let out a long sigh when the engine started again, and Miles started packing up his things.
"So, where are we getting off?"
"Bevington Road," said Daniel. "We can go to the tuck shop and buy some chocolate for Dad and Toffee, in case they haven't got anything to eat.
And some tripwire."
"You can't buy tripwire in the tuck shop."
"Bet you can."
"How much do you bet?"
In the shop, they spent their pocket money on chocolate, jelly snakes, and a spool of fishing line that Miles had spotted on a shelf behind the counter. He stuffed the packet into the pocket of his blazer, and they walked back up the Woodstock Road, arguing about who had won the bet, given that, as Daniel insisted, it was not really tripwire at all and wouldn't work anyway. But when they turned into Alcuin Close, a different kind of problem presented itself. There was a policeman standing outside the house. He was looking the other way, so they were able to duck out of sight behind an overgrown bush in the corner of a neighbour's garden. They whispered the options rapidly. Go back to school? No. Go and find Dad at his college? No, because they didn't know where to find him. Go and walk along the river? No, because that would be boring. The museum would be even more boring, and it was no use going to the shops because they'd spent all their money. Then Daniel had the idea that they could go and see Leonard Croydon, who lived in a flat in Bevington Road. Once or twice they'd been taken there for their maths lesson, and it was easy to remember the way.
"What if he makes us go back to school?"
asked Miles, as they rounded the corner into Canterbury Road, which would take them dangerously close to the school grounds.
"He won't. He's a student, and students don't dob you in." "He dobs us in if we don't do our homework."
"That's different. He might ring Dad up for us.
I want to see Dad. And Toffee. I want to see Toffee.
Leonard Croydon's Morris Minor was parked outside in the street, but when they knocked on the door of his flat, no one answered. Miles was feeling hot and bothered. He sat down on the steps with his elbows on his knees and his chin in his hands, so that his mouth was squashed sideways as he spoke.
I wish we'd just gone to school. This is even more boring than geography. There's nothing to do. Absolutely, completely, positively, desperately, extremely nothing to do.
Daniel stomped down the steps and began raking up the gravel with his foot, drawing it round and round into a heap. But someone started knocking on one of the ground-floor windows, calling out to him, so he ran back out onto the pavement. That was when he noticed there was someone sitting in the driver's seat of Leonard Croydon's car. But it wasn't Leonard. It was a man with long, messy hair. Daniel stopped and looked at him, and he wound the window down.
I saw you, said the man. I saw you go in there.
He pointed to the gate. Miles had come up now. He stood next to Daniel, wondering what the problem was. The man suddenly laughed and clapped his hands. Daniel shifted uneasily.
What are you laughing at?
The two of you. Doubles. 6 of one and half a dozen of the other. I know you.
How?
Said Miles suspiciously.
I know where you live. 4 Alcuin Close. I know where you go to school. Why aren't you in school?
We're looking for Leonard Croydon.
Daniel's voice took on a tone of righteousness.
This is his car. You're in Leonard's car.
Course I am. I'll take you to where he is. Get in, unless you'd like to go to the school instead. Get in, get in, get in.
The man was jiggling around in his seat now, drumming on the steering wheel. Both boys got in the back, holding their satchels on their knees, and the car started and swerved out of its parking space so suddenly that they were thrown to one side. When they were out on the Banbury Road, going straight, Daniel started foraging in his pockets and pulled out the remains of the chocolate. He broke off 2 pieces and held them out to the driver.
Want some?
The man took it, opened his mouth wide and threw it in a way that made the boys laugh.
What's your name? Asked Daniel.
The Pink Panther.
No, it isn't.
Miles was giggling now.
The Pink Panther's a film, said Daniel. I know, because we weren't allowed to go to it. But Philip went, said Miles. He's our cousin, and Dad went.
Daniel interrupted.
Because there's a lady in it with great big bosoms sticking out to here.
To demonstrate, he held his cupped hands out as far as the space would allow. The boys giggled some more, but the man didn't seem to be joining in, so after a while they stopped and sat looking out of the window as the car went around the big roundabout.
We're going out into the country, said Daniel. Where are we going?
Told you, going to see Lenny Leonard.
We're not allowed to call him Lenny. So where is he?
Making circles.
What kind of circles?
As they came out of the roundabout, the man yanked at the gear lever, leaning forward in his seat as if to push the car to go faster.
What kind of circles?
Daniel repeated, emphasizing each word. In response, there was a shout of laughter.
Is that what you most want to know?
Miles didn't quite get the joke, but he giggled to pretend he did, and pushed his satchel onto the floor in front of him. The car was speeding up now, and the road in front was rushing towards them.
How fast are we going?
How fast do you want to go?
I know this game, said Daniel. This is the questions game. Every time we ask you a question, you have to answer with a question, and every time you ask us a question, we have to answer with a question. Until someone makes a mistake, Miles nodded. Dad used to play that game with us in the car.
How fast do you want to go, then? Repeated the man.
Daniel got in first.
How fast can we go?
Miles followed up.
Can we go 100 miles an hour?
Is that what you most want to know?
That's cheating, said Daniel. Repeating is cheating. So what's your name really? Asked Miles, trying to sound serious and sensible.
Inglebert Humperdinck the Mighty Quinn, good golly, Miss Molly, and the Sundance Kid. I am the Walrus.
The Mighty Quinn's the thong. You're giving us a quiz.
I'm giving you a quiz, so guess my name.
You can't guess someone's name, said Daniel. It could be anything. It could be Alexander or Marmaduke or anything. We've got 22 boys in our class, and they all have different names, except the Johns. There are 2 Johns, and another one in the lower second. Are you called John?
I shouldn't think so. Try again.
Rumpelstiltskin,
said Miles, and coughed sharply.
You can call me Smith.
Mr. Smith.
Just Smith.
The car was going faster than they'd ever been before, and the air was rushing through the open windows. Miles gave a sharp cough, then tried to suppress the next cough, but it broke out of him as 3, 4, 5 coughs. He foraged around in his satchel for the puffer, shook it, and pressed twice, but hardly anything came out. He shook it again and took another dose.
"I've run out of puffer,"
he said, pushing the empty inhaler into the pocket of his blazer. Daniel had his face right up to the window, to feel the air rushing at him, as if it were trying to blow his hair off. Miles wound his own window up and sank into the back seat, his arms crossed sulkily.
"Anyway," he said to the man, "you're wearing Leonard's jacket. That's his black corduroy jacket. We met him in Oxfam when he was buying it. It's too big for him. Is that why he gave it to you?"
Shouldn't think so. It's too small for me. It's nobody's jacket. It's wandering round the world, from one person to the next, but it'll never fit.
Miles laughed politely.
"That's funny. You're funny."
The man jogged up and down in his seat, as if he was riding a horse, hammering the palms of his hands against the steering wheel. Chapter 22. An incident room was being set up in a community hall in the nearby village of Reddleton. The place turned out to be a converted barn, and its interior would still have been perfectly suited to stacking hay bales. Rough wooden floorboards had been put in, and brightly painted hangings decorated the walls, but there was no ceiling, and the cavernous space of the roof allowed free play to any crosswinds. It was divided up with partitions that could be moved around to suit the occasion. They were covered in posters for local activities that were being replaced with investigation maps and photographs of the scene of crime. Bryony tried not to be distracted by the painful irony of seeing a colourful display about the coming weekend's harvest festival moved to make way for last night's discoveries. Strange fruit. Another partition, cleared of its notices, now bore the label "Suspects" at the top. She stood aside to make way for a line of people carrying typewriters, phones, and file card boxes. The typewriters looked outdated and heavy, and the filing boxes were the wooden kind that stacked in towers. If we fill all those, she thought, we've already lost. Macready hated this kind of setup. To him, filing cards were at best for collecting dead leads, and at worst for burying live ones. After doing a full tour of the barn, she concluded that really there was nowhere in here suitable for conducting interviews. An elderly woman with tightly curled grey hair was arranging a row of tables against the back wall, removing the cloths and vases, which she was packing into a box. Bryony approached her. "Excuse me, where's the nearest ladies?" The toilets had to be in a separate building, as there didn't appear to be any plumbing attached to the barn, and chances were there'd be other outbuildings, a kitchen and perhaps a storage room that could be adapted.
"Oh, sorry, love. Did nobody show you? Round the back here."
Bryony was led through a latched wooden door and across a paved yard to a cottage with a front door that opened onto a room filled with toddler-sized tables and chairs. There were magic roundabout posters on the walls and toys stacked in a playpen in the corner.
"This is where we have the preschool," said the woman. "Mondays and Wednesdays only, so there won't be any little ones in your way today. Toilets are down the passageway there, and if you need to make yourself a cup of tea, there's a kitchen of sorts in here."
She opened a bright red door.
"Let me know if you need anything else."
Left to herself, Bryony stood in the middle of the playroom, where Florence and Zebedee, Dougal and Mr. Rusty looked down reproachfully at her from the walls. How could she think of bringing murder suspects into a place where small children ate stewed apple and did finger-painting? But there was no question. It was the obvious choice for an interview room. As she was leaving the cottage, she encountered Macready coming out of the barn.
"Ah, Williams, yes, we need to talk. Is there somewhere in there?"
Why did she always end up dealing with Macready in such bloody awkward situations? He hardly seemed to register the decor, but hesitated for a moment before seating himself on a yellow table and planting one foot on the little chair that went with it. She leaned against a cupboard, instinctively picking up a ball of plasticine that was sitting there. "I was just thinking we could have this converted to an interview room, sir."
"I dare say."
The face was characteristically deadpan, but the eyebrow made a telltale arabesque.
"Shrewd psychology on your part, Williams. Among the dreams of early childhood to which the thwarted life courses of all killers seek return."
Then, without missing a beat, he launched into a long and detailed account of the search results so far. 2 bodies, female, probably adolescent, that had been there at least 6 months. 1 body, adult male, recent, a few days at most. The autopsies had begun and were likely to be prolonged. Any ID?
"There's one of the puzzles, Williams. No attempts were made to conceal the identity of our 2 victims at the Pit Rivers, defaced as they were. Here, some trouble has evidently been taken to remove positive identification. No wallet, no watch, empty pockets."
"There's a man called Jed in our photograph. We haven't got a surname for him. He's surely the first possibility we have to check on. He was wearing quite distinctive clothing, an anorak and laced boots. The body I saw didn't seem to have any outer clothing, but if it was removed it must be somewhere."
"The search parties have been instructed to look for it."
"And what about the first body, the one we stumbled into?"
"It's one of 2 badly decomposed female cadavers on the opposite side of the tree. At this stage there's no reliable information as to how long they've been there. Separated bones are also appearing, which are very likely from further human victims, but then again, they could be decades, if not centuries old. All amid the spreading tree roots. It's an oak tree, Williams, considerably older than its upstart companions in that little wood. A tree of death. Legend sometimes feeds the human imagination in dangerous ways. Talking of which, there's been another find that will be of particular interest to you."
He drew from his pocket an evidence bag and held it out to her.
"I think you will recognise those."
Bryony put down the lump of plasticine, now warm and well kneaded, and took out her latex gloves to examine the contents. 2 stones. One was an almost exact replica of what she'd found in Sylvie's hand. The other, slightly smaller and rounder, was closer to the shape of a human eyeball. "The carvings are the same from what I can make out. Impossible to tell the words, though."
"The busy fiend control."
"That's what Nash discovered." She handed him back the bag. "These were buried deep in the ground by the looks of it."
"Underneath the bodies. More may be turned up. If there is one for each body, we're missing some, even on the present count. And how many more bodies are we to unearth?"
Macready stared at the sky-blue linoleum floor, apparently deep in concentration, then began to recite.
"O Lord, whose mercies numberless o'er all thy works prevail, though daily man thy laws transgress, thy patience cannot fail."
The Aberdeen accent gave precision to the words and a poetic lilt to the lines. "I can understand anyone resorting to prayer in the circumstances," said Bryony, "but is that all that's left to us, sir?"
"George Frederick Handel's Soul, Act 1, he replied. "The next 2 lines are, if yet his sin be not too great, the busy fiend control." The verses are sung to a quite appealing tune. If yet his sin be not too great. There can hardly be greater, I think.
than what has been committed up there next door to Wayland the Smith's lair. The murder of innocents, stoning to death. But what is the motive?
There's no evidence of sexual assault.
The bodies are not recent enough for any forensic confirmation on that score, but the clothing is undisturbed, and nothing else in this case is pointing in that direction. The force and speed of the attack on Nash and Crouch was almost superhuman. It was furious, yet controlled.
Was there more than one assailant?
Pavan thinks that is unlikely.
What about this Saul story, then? Is that relevant?
The story of Saul is one of the strangest episodes in the Bible, Williams. Saul conjures up the spirits of the dead in an attempt to turn his fate. It makes for a dramatic scene in the opera, as you may imagine. There's something demonic about his character.
Before the days of psychology, sir.
Exactly. And a psychologist is what we need here. I've persuaded DCI Latham to come from Bristol to advise us. He'll be arriving this afternoon.
Macready sprang to his feet.
But now, this morning is the time for the return of lost souls, Williams. And Mr. Sean Adderley is waiting to talk to us.
The man the Druids were looking for yesterday.
More of a boy than a man. Have him searched before he's brought in here, and get the furniture changed. I'll be back in half an hour.
Bryony stood for a moment, staring at the picture of Florence. Steve Latham, she said. Oh dear, not again. Sean Adderley had been found by a party of walkers who had spotted him sleeping rough in one of the chalk pits just off the Ridgeway at West Overton. They drove him to Avebury, where the local GP had assessed him. Shipway and Jeffries had then been given the job of delivering him to the incident room. The doctor's verdict was interesting. Sean had evidently been out all night, but his temperature, blood pressure and heart rate were like those of someone who just won a race. All this pointed to his being on something. Bryony was trying to guess his age. He was small and underweight, with greasy hair and staring brown eyes. There were spots of vivid colour in his cheeks, which gave him a fresh-faced look until you got a bit closer. "He's not a local?" she asked.
"He doesn't live round here," said Jeffries. "But we see him often enough. Too young to be getting up to what he does. We've had our eye on him because we think he's involved in some drug dealing that goes on at Barbary Castle. It's pretty remote up there, so they think they're safe bringing out large quantities of the hard stuff. We caught a group of them in the summer who had about £10,000 worth of cocaine on them."
"Cocaine? That's a bit unusual, isn't it?"
"Very, apparently. At least among those hippie types. We had an advisor come down from Scotland Yard to give us a briefing about it. He thought they were experimenting with some new way of processing it. There's an old public convenience up there, a concrete hut that seems to be pretty suitable for the purpose."
"So you'd have a list of people involved in that?"
"Oh, yes. The drug squad at Scotland Yard might be your most reliable source, though, because they took over the investigation. They think there's links to some trading in the West End of London. Our job's just to keep a lookout in the area."
"You happen to know if there was anyone on the list whose first name's Adrian?"
"Not off the top of my head, no," said Jeffries. "I'll go back and check the records. But I wouldn't be surprised if your Macready has done that already."
"Well, he does have good connections with Scotland Yard. Still, see what you can find out, will you?" It didn't take long to check Sean over. He was cooperative enough, and he was so skinny that his clothing hung loose, readily revealing the few things he had about him. In the back pocket of his sagging jeans was a small plastic bag containing what looked like 3 sugar lumps. "Is that cocaine?" she asked. He twitched, but said nothing. "OK. We need to have a bit of a talk about your adventures, Sean. Come with me." A normal table and chairs had been moved into the interview room, but the posters were still in place. Sean stood staring at Zebedee and seemed oblivious of Bryony's attempts to get him to sit down.
"Who's that?" he asked.
It was the first time he'd spoken. "It's Zebedee. Haven't you ever seen the magic roundabout?"
"What?"
His face was contorted with puzzlement.
It's a children's television programme.
Oh, that. The tension seemed to go out of him, and he dropped into the chair just as Macready made his entrance, followed by Elsingham, who was prepared with a notebook. They took their seats, and Macready began straight away. Sean Arley. How old are you? 17, I think. About. You think? It's no great age to keep account of. There was no response, other than a couple of sharp twitches. Macready gestured at the sachet of white crystals that Bryony had placed in the centre of the table. It appears you or your associates have some skills in chemistry. Sean slumped further in his chair, caving in on himself in the all-too-familiar attitude of the young suspect on a drug charge. Macready leaned forward and lowered his voice. To tell you the truth, I'm not all that interested in your chemical experiments. I want to know where you've been. There was a long pause, during which one of Sean's legs began jiggling spasmodically, until the movement travelled up his body, and he started to literally squirm in his seat. Macready repeated the question, and finally an answer came out. Barbary Castle.
How long were you there for?
Asked Bryony. I don't know, few hours, till nightfall.
And there were other people there?
Some, but they were in the lab. I'm not allowed in the lab. By the lab, I take it you mean the public toilets, said Macready crustily. Sean stared at him, blank-faced. They call it the lab. I don't want to go in there anyway. I like to be out and about. Evidently. You've been out and about for a long time. Some 40 hours, your friends tell us. They're extremely concerned about you. Did you spend all that time at Barbary Castle? He shook his head. Waiting for the follow-up information, Macready held the silence. Bryony was used to this strategy of his with recalcitrant interview subjects. Let them feel the ticking of the clock, the hardness of the chair, the tedium of their own minds as they sat there. But this subject was in a state of his own, squirming as if something were crawling all over him, while mentally he seemed quite disconnected. He was having withdrawal symptoms, Bryony thought, and if he got any worse, they wouldn't get anything out of him at all. On impulse, she broke protocol and cut short the silence. Let's just do the timing on this, shall we? You've been out 2 nights, from late afternoon the day before yesterday to this morning. What day is it? Friday. Then it was last night. What was last night? I saw him. Sean began to look more alert, as if what he saw was immediately visible on the wall behind her head. If you go out on the night, and you go in the right place, you can see him.
So what's the right place?
One of his places. Smith's Ridge, Wayland's Wood, Tower Hill, Fifield Down, where the portals are. First I went along Smith's Ridge, I don't know how far. Then I went the other way, till I got to Hackpen Pits, and I had a sleep through the day. Last night the mist come through, and I went across Fifield Down. Sometimes he comes in the mist. Here the speech stalled, and Sean just sat, staring. Bryony noticed that his breath was becoming shorter, and the livid spots on his cheeks were more pronounced. He began to tremble again, all over now. This time Macready interrupted. "Who's this we're talking about, Sean?" he insisted. For a second the boy met his eye. "Mabon." "Mabon. Describe him to me." There was a sequence of odd headshakes that looked like someone trying to work himself free of a noose. Macready pushed on. "What did he look like?" "Can't say." Sean twisted in his chair, looked at Zebedee again, and gave a sharp, hollow laugh. "Not like that." "How was he dressed?" The laugh again. "You must be able to remember something about what he looked like." Sean rocked backwards and forwards, his hands trapped between his knees. I remember. I'll draw him for you if you like. Give me a pencil and I'll draw him." Bryony dived into the cupboards under the window and found some sheets of drawing paper and crayons. Macready started foraging in the upper row of cupboards.
from which he triumphantly produced a large jar of jelly beans. He placed it on the table and unscrewed the lid. "Help yourself, laddie. We'll take a 10-minute break now. D.C. Elsingham will keep you company while you complete the portrait. But first, Elsingham, get our friend some Coca-Cola if you wouldn't mind." Bryony was starting to wonder whether Sean's delirium was catching. She lengthened her step to keep up with Macready as he strode across the courtyard. "What's with the Dutch uncle act, sir, if you don't mind my asking?" "Sugar," he said, and came to a halt. "It may help stave off the withdrawal symptoms and make him a bit more talkative. My advice from Scotland Yard is that young Sean Adderley is associated with a group that's been creating a new drug from the old demon, cocaine. They've been experimenting with certain compounds, and it appears they've found a new method that enables the drug to be smoked." "Smoked? How? I thought you had to snort it." "I don't have the full recipe, Williams, but I'm told the magic ingredient it depends on is household baking soda. Cocaine use is associated with raised body temperature and heart rate, which may account for this young man's being able to stay outdoors in exposed conditions for 2 nights without becoming hypothermic." "If Scotland Yard knows about all this, sir, why is it still going on?" "What do you think, Williams? Work it out, work it out." "They're monitoring. They want to see where these experiments lead, and who they lead to." Macready gave a single curt nod, evidently considering the conversation closed, but she held on to the thread. "But that means they must know a lot about the experiments, and also about who's doing them. Are they using an undercover agent?" "That is not your business to know, Williams, or mine." "I gave you a report on this character, Adrian. We don't even have a surname yet. Is he connected to this?"
"Adrian John Gill, 19 years old, no fixed address. Treated at the Warrenford Hospital last April for an acute delusionary episode with violent behaviour. He was under the impression that he could knock down Magdalen College wall with his bare fists. The damage to his hands required 23 stitches. He treated the ambulance staff to a colourful lecture on the power of the human will."
Bryony's first reaction to this was indignation. How do you tell a short-tempered boss who is always in a hurry that, even if he is 3/4 of the way to being a genius, he ought to have the courtesy to share critical information as it comes in? But she had her own needs to follow, and there was no time to waste. 10 minutes was just long enough for a phone call to Canning. The phones had been moved from a neat line-up along one wall to separated positions on the various desks and tables. She picked one on a small table next to a dividing screen that gave at least a modicum of privacy, and dialed St. Aldate's station.
"Yes, I paid a visit to our 2 young gentlemen," Canning said. "Quite a handful they are, I should think, even in the normal course of events. 1st of May, they tell me, was the date of their little adventure."
1st of May? They're sure about that?
"Could be accurate. They remembered it was on the same day as the May morning singing, but I'm a bit sceptical of the rest of the story. Boys with a vivid imagination was my impression. Contradicted themselves when I tried to cross-check the story. I'd suggest you talk to them yourself, Inspector."
When Bryony returned to the interview room, Sean was still completing the sketch, making rapid strokes with a black crayon. It was immediately clear that he was a natural artist. The figure emerging on the paper was 3-dimensional and dramatic, a dense mass of sweeping lines that brought out the features of a beast face, with deep, hollow eyes, an elongated jaw, and arching antlers. But in the expression and the set of the mouth, it was also, somehow, human. Macready entered quietly, and, like Bryony, stood a discreet distance away, watching him. Sean brought the empty Coke bottle to his mouth occasionally as he worked. It was as if he was now, however temporarily, back in control of his energy, and as he added detail to the drawing, he began to talk, apparently to himself.
"He follows you. You might want to turn around in case he's there, but if he catches you looking, he's gone. Either that or he jumps, and he's right there in front of you. Then you're the one that's a goner. But if the power gets in you, and you call him, that's when you see him properly, because he comes to meet you on the path."
Chapter 23.
"So where are we going?" Daniel asked. And yes, it is what we most want to know, isn't it, Miles?
Miles nodded. Round and round the mulberry bush, up the ladder and down the wall.
We have to be back in Oxford for the 5 o'clock bus, or we'll get into trouble, said Daniel. We shouldn't be going so far away, said Miles.
Shouldn't and shouldn't, could and couldn't. You want to learn some willpower. Get yourselves a teacher.
Smith punched the windscreen with his fist.
Where's Leonard, then?
In the trees, up here, with some old friends.
The car turned off the proper road onto a track that was quite bumpy, so they were rocked from side to side, and as one or other of the tyres went through a puddle, it churned up a fountain of muddy water. When this happened, Smith let out a loud whoop and tried to spin the wheels by hitting the accelerator. Then suddenly they came to a halt. Up ahead they could see a police car parked right across the track, with other cars either side of it.
Oink, oink,
Smith snorted.
Pigs in the way!
He yanked at the gear lever and put the car in reverse, rolling backwards quite slowly, until they were back down the hill out of sight of the police cars. Then he sped up, backing all the way to the main road. The road had twists and bends all along, because it was going round the hillside, and as they got higher up they were driving through veils of mist that drifted across the windscreen like smoke. Smith kept turning his head, looking first on one side, then on the other. This made Daniel nervous.
You're supposed to look ahead, he said. You should look where you're going when you're driving.
Shut up!
Yelled Smith at the top of his voice, so the words came out hoarse. Daniel almost started to cry. He sucked his lips hard into his mouth and stuck his chin out to stop himself. Miles, who had his arms folded, tightened them across his chest. They drove on for a while like that, without anyone speaking, and the car got slower until it came to a halt. Smith pulled the handbrake on, got out, and threw his seat forward for them to climb out after him. The boys stood close together, their blazers pulled tight around them because the wind was cold up here. Smith picked up some stones from the ground and put them in his pocket. Miles, copying him, crouched to collect some for himself, but that provoked another sudden shout.
Drop it!
Miles dropped the stone.
I was only... They're not for playing with, barked Smith.
Daniel thrust his hands into his pockets.
Then what are they for?
They're for later.
Smith pointed to a tree a bit further up.
Go and wait there. I want you to see someone.
He was smiling again now and speaking in a normal voice.
Or more like, he wants to see you.
Who?
Visitor.
Are you coming?
I'm going round the other way. Go on, hurry up.
It's misty, said Miles. We don't want to get lost.
Can't get lost. Only as far as that tree, then stay there.
Smith ran off around the other side of the car, and the boys had a conference in hurried whispers.
I'm not scared of the visitor, said Daniel, but I don't like fog. You can get lost in the fog. We can use the tripwire, said Miles, to tie us together.
He pulled out the spool of transparent nylon twine, and they knotted the ends of it into their belts.
Should we try to run away from him?
Daniel looked around.
No, because there's nowhere to go. We're in the middle of nowhere, and nobody knows where we are. If we do what he says, he might take us home afterwards.
The tree wasn't very far away, but the hill was quite steep, so they concentrated on following a trail through the grass. When they got to the top, they could see that on one side it was quite misty, but on the other the view was a bit clearer. The ground went down and up again, with a wide track leading the way over there. Daniel walked around the tree a couple of times, which meant Miles had to follow.
What are you doing? He complained. You're making me dizzy. Anyway, what's that?
He was pointing into the mist, where a strange shape like a tree branch was moving towards them. Daniel came and stood close to him.
It's a tree. I don't like it. It's not a tree, it's got a face.
The giant head moved slowly, turning from side to side as if it were blindly looking for something, and made a low moaning noise as it went. Then it seemed to have found them, because it came straight for them with its blank eyes showing white in the dark mass of its face. Miles couldn't move, but Daniel was pulling him away, stumbling down the hill back to the car. They scrambled inside and slammed the door, then pushed the lock down and wound up the window.
"It's all right," Daniel whispered. "It can't get us in here."
They waited in silence, listening to the sound of the wind whistling around the car, until Smith ran back out of the mist, his eyes staring and his long hair flying in all directions, and slapped his hands down on the roof. Then he pulled at the door handle, jerking it up and down until Daniel released the lock. Smith dropped into the seat.
"Close the door," hissed Daniel, "so it can't get in."
Smith slammed the door, then rolled his head back, let his hands flop out either side of him, and started to laugh.
"What?"
shouted Daniel.
"What's so funny?"
"It can't get in! It can't get in!" Smith mimicked Daniel's high voice. Then his own voice came back, hard and loud. "Oh, it can get in. It can fucking get in wherever it fucking wants. It's the fucking visitor!" He turned the key, put his foot on the accelerator, and drove off with a squeal of tires. Chapter 24. Macready went off to check the progress of the autopsies, leaving Bryony and Elsingham to follow up on Sean Adderley's story. They went back through the interview notes that Elsingham had taken in careful, rounded handwriting. "You did well with these," said Bryony. Elsingham shrugged. "He talked slow." Smith's Ridge, Wayland's Wood, Tower Hill, Fifield Down. If they're special places of some sort, maybe that's where we should look for Claire. She spread out the Ordnance Survey map on the table, and they identified the locations. Tower Hill's the closest to Wayland's Wood. I'll tell them to get a search party moving in that direction. But I think we should go over to Fifield Down ourselves. See if there's any traces of activity where this thing is supposed to have made its appearance. Hadn't we better get some local support? What about asking Sergeant Jeffries to take us? We need him where he is, with the search parties. Besides, Sergeant Jeffries isn't going to know about portals. I've got a better idea. We'll ask Wade. But before that, where's Hannah? She's joined the search line, with the Druids. Best place for her, long as she doesn't break ranks. Let's find Wade. They were just in time to catch Wade driving his jeep down the track bordering Wayland's Wood. They signalled for him to stop, and Bryony sprinted round the front of the car to talk to him. He looked amused. "Light on your feet, aren't you, for such a tall one?" "Mr. Bowman, I told you about the name." "Wade, we need your assistance, please." "So do my sheep. What's up?" "I need to know about the places called portals." "Do you now?" Wade said. "And I suppose you expect to have it all explained to you while you stand in the middle of the road." "Not quite. We want you to take us to one of them, on Fifield Down." Wade stopped the engine and opened the passenger door of the jeep. "Why don't you at least take a seat so you can tell me what you're on about?" "Sean Adderley's been found, and he's got a story about seeing some vision out on Fifield Down," said Bryony. "Been talking to a visitor, has he? Well, I'm glad to hear he's back safe." "We need to go over to Fifield Down now, to inspect the particular area he's talking about. We thought you might help us locate it." He drummed his fingers on the rim of the steering wheel, dropped his chin onto his chest, then looked sideways at Bryony. "Oh, you do have a way of putting people on the spot, don't you?" "If you drive over there, we'll follow." "You can't drive through the Valley of the Stones. Not in that thing." He jerked his head in the direction of their car. "I can get most of the way to the portal in the jeep, but it's rough going." "Fine. We'll follow you as far as we can, then get out and join you when you leave the road." "Not likely. There's only 2 seats in this, and you couldn't ride on the back over that sort of ground. Even my dog would get thrown out." "It'll have to be you and me then, won't it?" They left Elsingham on the ridgeway just above Overton Hill. Wade drove the jeep east, along the path into the valley, where the mist was still thick and grew denser as the track turned downward. "Are you sure it's okay to drive through this?" asked Bryony. "I don't know how you can see where you're going." "I don't see where I'm going. I know where I'm going. That's why you've got me out here, isn't it? The mist hangs about in this valley sometimes." Bryony was suddenly jolted in her seat and clung to the side of the car as several jolts followed. "I warned you, didn't I? These are only little stones, but I'll have to stop in a minute, because I can't risk running into the bigger ones down there." As the ground levelled out, the jeep ground to a halt, and he pulled on the handbrake with a sharp creak. The noise seemed to drop into an immense silence. Bryony got out and stood there watching the thick white clouds roll across in front of her in several directions. The wind was coming from behind them, but it was as if the mists ignored it. They had a presence of their own. She was glad of the solid figure of Wade standing beside her. "Portals," he said. "Supposed to be places where the worlds meet. Myself, I'm of the view that those places are in the mind. But maybe coming out here makes the mind open up to them. I dare say you're a girl with her head screwed on. But you want to be sure to keep your mind on the job right now. Don't go letting your imagination run away with you." "I'm trained not to do that." "Perhaps you are, or think you are. Imagination is sensitivity. You strike me as someone who's got more of that than you realize." "All right. We'll walk through to the portal then. If you follow in my footsteps, you'll be fine. But remember, there's stones all around us. Sarsens, big enough to send you sprawling, and it's a hard fall across one of them." He set off, slow and steady, and she literally picked her way from his footprints, feeling like the page behind Good King Wenceslas. Wade was a good man, wasn't he? If she'd misjudged him now, it could be the last mistake she'd make. A stray gust of wind buffeted her with a sudden shove. It was the wind, wasn't it? "Keep your mind on the job," she told herself. After about 10 minutes, Wade came to a halt. Beside him was a humped stone, waist high. He put his hand on it. "We have to walk around this. Go careful, because there's another one right next to it, see?" The neighbouring stone was lower and darker, easy to trip over. "There's a ring of Sarsens." He took her arm and guided her in. "They're all around us here. This is the portal. The idea is you stand in here, and the spirits are drawn to approach. But they don't cross the boundary of the circle, so if you've attracted anything dangerous, you've got some protection." Bryony could just make out the varied shapes of the stones, which formed a circle about 12 feet in diameter. She crouched to look at the ground, moist and bare of grass, a perfect canvas for footprints. "Would you mind standing still a minute?" she asked. "I want to see who else might have been here." Sean had been wearing ragged plimsolls with worn rubber soles that might correspond with some smooth prints in the circle. But then there was something else, the pattern of a bare foot, so distinct in the mud that you could see the shape of the arch and the criss-cross marking of the flesh. She stood up again and looked ahead. Wade had his back to her, and his head bowed as if he was deep in thought. Maybe he was right, that she had more imagination than she realized, because last night's dream was playing back through her mind. As she tried to keep her attention on more immediate sights and sounds, though, she became convinced that there was a wavering dark shape moving towards her. Her breath caught in her throat, and for several long seconds she watched it, unable to even cry out. Wade, who was also watching, held very still for a moment before he spoke out in a steady voice. "Hold where you are." The shadow stopped, and as Bryony gathered her wits, she saw that it was a human silhouette. Obeying an instinct created by years of training, she stepped out of the circle and went to meet it. The Maynard of her dream had shrunk to the image of a sick girl, hair blackened by the rain, fringed coat transformed into a sodden mess, and her naked feet blue with cold. Claire. Wade carried her to the jeep, where Bryony took a good look at her. Her mouth was clenched shut. There was a purple tinge around her lips and under her eyes, and purple blotches down the left side of her face, which might have been bruising, but might also have been a symptom of her general condition. Spasms of violent shivering passed through her body. Bryony bound Claire's feet up in the scarf Constable Shipway had lent her, then began to pull away the drenched coat, which was stiff and clung like a monstrous second skin. When they finally got her out of it, she was wearing only a T-shirt. "Hypothermia," said Bryony, pulling off her own coat and wrapping it round her. "We have to get her to a hospital." The three of them squashed in across the front seats of the jeep, with Bryony sitting on the handbrake, and they drove back to the Ridgeway in second gear. There they transferred Claire to the police vehicle. The radio was out of range, but as they got back out on the main road, Bryony managed to get a call through to the control room at HQ. "B-23 to Tango Bravo. We've picked up Claire Belmont at Uffington Fort in M Division. We'll take her to the nearest hospital in Wantage. Get the information to DCS McCready immediately, will you?" The officer in the control room did his work well, and by the time they reached the hospital, 2 paramedics were waiting for them with a stretcher and a cylinder of oxygen. Bryony told Elsingham to find Hannah and give her the news, then return. She was about to go into the hospital when Wade turned up. He insisted on going with her to wait at reception while Claire was assessed and sat, arms folded, without speaking. At last one of the doctors appeared, a woman about Bryony's age, who introduced herself as Dr. Sutton. "She's in better condition than we first thought. Her heart's strong and her breathing's getting back to normal, but she's still pretty confused. I wouldn't like your chances of getting a rational conversation with her before tomorrow. Is it urgent?" "Absolutely. She's a vital witness in a murder case." "She was semi-conscious when you brought her in. Another 20 minutes in that state and she'd probably have collapsed." "Then we wouldn't even have found her," said Bryony, "because really she found us. She came wandering out of the mist. Looking like a drunkard, no doubt. People with hypothermia lose muscle control. Sometimes they wander around like zombies until they drop, because they haven't got the coordination to stop or sit down. Right now what she most needs is a few hours of good deep sleep, but I suppose you could have a short time with her first." How much easier would it be, Bryony thought, if the world were run by women like this? She'd been mentally preparing for an argument with a poker-faced man in a white coat who was used to thinking of police as second-class citizens. "Thanks," she said. "I'll just ask her a few questions." Wade got up. "I'll come in with you," he said. Bryony's first thought was to say no, but so far Wade had been solidly helpful. Maybe it actually was a good idea. Claire was sitting up in bed with a drip in her arm, and her hair scraped back rather too severely. But even like that she gave off a powerful aura. She did not seem to register their presence at all. Bryony sat by the bed and tried to get her attention. "Claire?" No response. "Claire, how are you feeling?" It was like speaking to a waxwork. Wade passed a hand in front of her eyes, but she didn't even blink. "As I thought," he said. "Now look at this." He held one finger up to the left of Claire's face. "You can hear my voice, Claire, and you can see my finger." He moved the finger slowly across to the right, then up, then down. This time the eyes followed. Keeping the finger in front of her, he spoke softly. "Hello, Claire. Where you been, then?" The lips moved slightly, as if about to form words. Bryony was going to say something again, but Wade signalled that she should wait. The lips went on moving, but no sound came out. He moved the finger back till it was level with his own face. "Look at me now. We found you in the Valley of Stones, at the portal. You're going to follow me out of there. Understand?" "Just a minute," Bryony interrupted. "Is this hypnotism?"
Sure, it's hypnotism, but she's already hypnotized. I'm bringing her back, that's all. Means retracing her steps."
Bryony was acutely uneasy. What were Wade's credentials for this kind of meddling? "If she needs a psychiatrist, we'll call a professional."
"She doesn't need a psychiatrist. Do you, Claire? You just need to come back home. But you need a guide."
"I'm sorry," said Bryony, getting up from her seat. "I can't allow it, not without medical advice. I'll call the doctor."
"I'll call the doctor,"
said Claire's voice, in a perfect imitation of Bryony's, with the slight hint of a Welsh accent. Bryony wheeled around and sat down again. "What's that?" Silence. "Claire, if you can understand what I'm saying to you, I'd like to ask you some questions about where you've been."
"Where you've been?"
"Yes, we need your help."
"You need my help?"
"Yes, we do. Whatever you can..."
"You need help?"
Claire turned and stared at Bryony, her eyes coming alive with a hard, piercing look. Suddenly this was the face in Bryony's nightmare, and she backed off instinctively. But the stare followed her, as if holding her in an invisible grip, and the words came out one at a time like bullets.
"You need help. There's a swing with yellow ropes, still moving backwards and forwards. There's no one on it. You can't see what's pushing it."
Bryony was dumbstruck. For a few seconds she couldn't believe what she was hearing.
"She's not coming back," said Claire, with a sudden smile. "Not ever."
Almost without knowing what she was doing, Bryony bolted for the door and shut it behind her, then leant against the wall, panting. A passing nurse stopped, led her to a bench and got her a glass of water. Wade came out a couple of minutes later. "She'll be all right," he said to the nurse. "I'll take her for some fresh air." Then, holding Bryony's arm, he guided her out of the building. "There's some gardens over there. Let's walk around a bit." Bryony let herself be led. She was still trembling so much she could hardly speak. "Claire knows something about you, doesn't she?" said Wade.
"How did she know? How on earth did she know?"
"Now she's said what she said, why don't you tell me about it?"
Bryony pulled her coat together and did up the buttons.
"Goes back to when I was 7 years old. I had a cousin, a year older than me, Alison. She was more like a sister, really, because she lived a couple of streets away and we played together all the time. There was a swing in my back garden, with a yellow seat, and we used to push each other on it. I came home from school one day, and the swing was going backwards and forwards on its own, as if someone was on it. I was sort of mesmerized by it, and I stood and watched it for about 10 minutes before I went up and sat on it. Then it seemed to take off again of its own accord. A bit later my mother came out and asked if I'd seen Alison, because she hadn't come back from school. Well, she never came back."
Bryony felt her voice breaking and stopped, clasping her hands together to keep them from shaking.
"Anyway, we went through the whole thing. The first hours asking round everyone, sure that she must have gone to see another friend or something. Then through the night, and the next morning, wandering about, unable to understand how the world could look so normal. The first week, then the first month, she disappeared without a trace. And I never told anyone about that swing. Not a living soul."
"Well, now you have."
Wade's voice was calm and steadying.
"That's what living souls are for, you know. To give you a bit of a lifeline out of something like that. Don't blame Claire in there for what she knows. It's just something coming through her, and whatever she says, she's the one who needs help."
"Well," Bryony made a rapid effort to recompose herself, "here's someone who's come a long way to help her already." Hannah was jogging up the path towards them.
"So where is she? Is she all right? Can I see her?"
When Bryony got back to the car, she found Elsingham eating a takeaway hamburger and chips. He offered her the carton, and she fished out a rather limp-looking chip.
"So, what's up with Claire?
he asked. "She going to be all right?" "Should be, but I can't get any sense out of her. Could be another 24 hours before she's coherent, and that's hoping."
"What's the matter with her exactly?"
"Well, we're guessing really. The doctor I spoke to mentioned amnesia. It's possible. Severe hypothermia can lead to loss of consciousness, and she was on the edge of that when we found her. If there's insufficient blood circulating through the brain, as I said, I'm guessing."
"You don't think she was, hypnotised?"
Bryony stopped with a chip halfway to her mouth. "Why do you say that?"
"Well, you know what I was thinking about as I was enjoying the view of the South Midlands through traffic? Kevin Donnelly. He tried hypnotism on Sylvie Beck. And a lot of what we've found out so far fits the picture in that peculiar statement he made."
"You might be right. When we get back to Oxford, we'll bring Donnelly in for a proper grilling. The hypnosis angle is definitely worth looking into. Wade thinks she's hypnotised. He wanted to bring her out of it, he said, but I stopped him. Anyway, Bryony felt the need to steer away from any further discussion of what had happened in the ward. We should get back to Reddleton." Almost as soon as they were on the road again, there was a radio call from Thames Valley headquarters.
"B23, the search party has found something on Tower Hill, about a mile south of the crime site. Pavan's gone over there, but Macready's busy. He wants you to take a look."
There was a minor road that crossed the ridgeway at Tower Hill, where 2 police cars were parked. A uniformed officer directed them to go up the track for 50 yards, then off to the right. There was still a veil of mist here, but it seemed to be clearing, and a small group of people soon came into view, clustered around an isolated tree. Bryony recognised several of the Druids from the Red Lion, though they'd dispensed with some of their trappings. Tom, the ovate, who she'd met in the pub, was among them. On the ground was a large piece of black cloth and what looked like an animal skull with antlers. Pavan was examining it, while the photographer stood by.
"The antlers don't belong," he said. "It's a horse's skull. They've been attached with wire rather cunningly to this wooden pole running through the centre. It's a bit unwieldy, but presumably designed so that it could be carried like this."
He raised the thing up, balancing the pole against his shoulder so that the skull reared above his head. The photographer began shooting, moving round him to get different angles.
"Now see, if you drape that cloth around you, it would produce a rather striking effect, I think." "You're not kidding," said Elsingham, arranging the cloak according to his instructions. A monstrous figure was created, some 8 feet high, with daylight showing through its hollow eyes. The black cloth turned out to be a long circular cloak with geometric symbols around the hem. "What's it for?" asked the photographer.
"A mummer's mask," said Tom.
"I've seen versions of it around the place, but nothing quite so screwy. Who'd want to be inside this? Usually it's a horse character decorated with flowers and streamers and a sort of hooped skirt. There are ceremonies where it's paraded through the village before they act a play around it."
Pavan lowered the thing to the ground again, panting with the effort.
"I must say you'd have to be a better strongman than I am to keep it over your head for more than a few minutes."
He propped it against the tree and bent down to examine the cloth.
"This is wet, but not soaked in the way it would have been if it had lain here long. The whole contraption's been dropped, I'd say, and recently. See where the sharp edge of the bone has cut the ground?"
Bryony put on a glove, picked up a chip out of the grass, and handed it to Pavan, who held it against the skull.
"It's from the end of the nose here, where the bone is quite brittle."
Bryony stood up and looked around. So if someone dropped it, or rather threw it off, they must have been in a hurry. Who found it? Fingers were pointed at a young woman who had been part of the conversation at the Red Lion yesterday. She'd taken the feathers out of her hair and was now wearing a black duffel coat. 2 other members of the Druid group were standing next to her.
"Robin's got sharp eyes," said one of them, "like her namesake."
"Can you take me to where you were when you first spotted it?" asked Bryony. The 3 of them walked with her down the hill towards the road, stopping about 20 yards away. From here, the tree seemed to be at the summit of a gradual rise, with the main hill behind it. Robin tested the view a bit to the left and the right.
"Hard to say exactly," she said. "But from where I was looking, that lower branch of the tree was pretty much level with the line of the hill, and I noticed what I thought was a big branch on the ground. Then—"
She walked forward a few steps.
"I realised it had to be something else. Turned out to be one of the antlers."
"How long ago was this?"
"An hour, maybe."
"And was there a lot of mist around?" "It was thicker than this," said one of her companions, "but not much." "And did any of you see anything else? You didn't see anyone round there?" Heads were shaken. "Stay there for a few minutes, would you?" she said. She walked back to the group by the tree and borrowed a police whistle from the uniformed sergeant who'd been directing the search, then drew Elsingham and Pavan aside. "I want to test something, Elsingham. Can you go and join that lot down there and ask them to walk further back, following the line of approach they took on the way here? When I blow the whistle, turn round and look this way and notice what you can see."
"What's the idea?"
asked Elsingham. "The ground around here rises in stages, so they'd have come over that hill before they started on the slope of this one, which means whoever was standing here could have spotted them before they saw him. That's what I want to test." She looked at Pavan. "You'd be about 5'11", that right?"
5'11.5", he said.
"Well, let's suppose whoever was playing round with this costume was a pretty tall bloke, 4 or even 5 inches taller than you." Elsingham, who was one step ahead of her now, found a rock about the right size and rolled it towards the trunk of the tree. "Good. Now stand on that, Pavan, if you wouldn't mind." The experiment was far from perfect, but good enough to demonstrate that the hypothesis had something going for it. If the mask-wearer had been interrupted, what was he up to? And for whose benefit was he wearing all that regalia? Bryony felt a strange kind of relief. "Well, that's one mystery solved," she said. "Sean Adderley met up with a very human kind of devil." Tom, who had been standing watching all this with his arms folded, stepped forward and grasped the horns, holding the face up in front of him.
"You've got it wrong," he said. "The point is, what makes a man get inside a thing like this? What gets inside him when he's looking out through these holes?"
Things were happening fast, but Bryony wasn't sure whether they were working themselves out or sliding into still deeper waters. As Elsingham started the car, she was filled with misgivings. "I keep wondering whether Macready's onto something he hasn't told me about. I want to check in with him." Macready was sitting in a makeshift office he'd put together by bringing 2 partitions into a corner of the barn, and he was in a suspiciously buoyant mood. He commended Bryony for the efficiency with which things had been handled, and studied the map as she gave her account of finding Claire Belmont.
"So, she's in a somewhat distracted state."
"You could put it that way."
Still far wide."
"Sir?"
"A quotation from King Lear. It describes the state of the king after a night with the elements."
"Far out is a more popular expression these days, sir."
"I told you this was a morning for the return of lost souls, Williams, and both of them have been wandering in the Valley of the Stones."
"Sean says he saw Mabon there. But now we find the costume up on Tower Hill. There's supposed to be a string of these portals between here and the western end of the Ridgeway. The masquerade is getting about a bit, isn't he? Sean knew he was going to be out on Fifield Down. He went there on purpose to try and raise him. But how does Claire get there, when we saw her in Wayland's Wood yesterday? We couldn't have got there without the jeep."
"Not entirely true."
He swivelled the map round and pointed to the area.
"It's a manageable walk from the village of Fifield, or from Smeaton to the north of it, or West Overton here to the south. The impression of remoteness is greatly exaggerated by the weather conditions, and no doubt the atmosphere of the place. But it's most unlikely that she would have gone the distance from Wayland Smithy on foot."
"So she could have been with someone who had a car. She's in a very strange state. almost trance-like.
Hypothermia, Williams. But there may be complications. I've just spoken to Latham on the phone, and he's been in communication with the hospital. He's arranged for Claire Belmont to be transferred to the Radcliffe Infirmary.
Bryony bit back an impulse to ask sarcastically what business it was of Steve Latham's to go organising things like that. No doubt he was about to come barging in on the case as if he knew it all, before he'd even begun to learn the complexities. She decided to change the subject. "Is there any progress on Adrian Gill, sir? My hunch is he's the one who was wearing the costume."
The devil's garb. Very likely. Would it surprise you, Williams, to hear that Superintendent Foster has made something of a breakthrough in the quest for news about Mr. Gill's activities?
Is this a story about footprints?
Indeed it is. The oldest clue in the book, and still one of the most reliable.
There are some clear footprints in the area where we found Claire, but I didn't see any like Gill's. What's the story, then?
Gill has made the mistake of acquiring a new pair of shoes by somewhat unorthodox means. Size 12 is beyond the standard range, but there are 2 specialist shoe shops in Oxford that keep some stock of it. Ducker's in Terrell Street, where I buy my own shoes, and a place in the covered market which keeps a bargain bin outside, where irregular sizes commonly end up.
So he helped himself? Bryony asked.
A pair of size 12 rubber-soled shoes was taken from the bargain bin one morning in early June, but the culprit was spotted by the manager, a Mr. Hartley, who chased him out to the street, where fortunately a police car was in sight.
But if Adrian was caught, I assume it's him you're talking about. He wouldn't have ever got to wear these shoes.
That is the glory of it. The case went to court. Mr. Gill confessed in an exemplary manner, and the magistrate put him on probation. In a fit of generosity, Mr. Hartley then gave the shoes to the young man as an encouragement to walk in the paths of righteousness in future. Adrian Gill chose instead to take up a new career as a domestic intruder, leaving distinctive footprints in 2 areas on the premises at 4 Alcuin Close and another in the back garden at 78 Kingston Road. Since the shoe had a ridged rubber sole, the impression was easy for Mr. Hartley to identify from the sketch Foster showed him.
So what about Gill's probation?
He left the address he'd given and was not tracked down.
And the footprints? I knew about the ones in the hallway. Where's the other place? We couldn't find any prints in the upstairs rooms. The floor was too rough.
The roof of a shed beneath the windows of the top floor was covered in leaf mould, which held one reasonably clear impression. Traces of leaf mould were also found on the floor of the spare room next to Sylvie Beck's bedroom.
What about fingerprints? I asked for some particular checks to be made in the kitchen.
That is something for you to follow up on then. Get back to Oxford, Williams. I want you to return to the inquiry lines from the Alcuin Close murder.
Chapter 25. Miles and Daniel had been silent for nearly half an hour, while Smith drove through the hills, then back onto the main road, all the time leaning into the steering wheel as if he was pushing the car onwards. Miles pressed his forehead against the car window to feel the vibrations, because when the vibrations got down into his chest, he found they sometimes helped his asthma. He had begun to feel as if the thing they had seen was a punishment for skiving. When you were in the classroom, at least you were safe. He thought about that for a while, then said,
"You can take us back to school if you like."
He looked at Daniel, who had untied the fishing line from his belt and was winding it round and round his fingers.
"That would be all right," Daniel said. "My watch says 10 to 3. We'd be just in time for the last lesson." "And detention," added Miles. "But we don't mind, really."
Smith lifted both hands from the steering wheel and slapped them back down again, so the car swerved. Miles decided it would be better to stay quiet and went back to looking out of the window. He wondered which direction they were going in and tried to read the signposts they passed. After a while he saw one that said Oxford. A bit further on there was a bigger sign that said Oxford 7. 7 miles wasn't very far. Then they slowed down. The signs still said Oxford straight ahead, but the car turned off.
Where are we going? Asked Daniel. We're supposed to be going home now, said Miles, or our mother will wonder where we are. The police might come looking for us. Smith didn't seem to have heard them. They were going up a hill, a steep hill, with the engine revving hard. At the top there was a view over the countryside, with the spires of Oxford glowing yellow in the valley far below them. If they stopped here, it would be a long way to walk. The car turned again and went round several sharp bends, so that the boys were thrown from side to side.
"Nearly home now," said Smith.
Daniel burst out.
But this isn't our home. Our home's in Oxford.
Miles tried to sound more polite.
Or Woodstock, actually, because that's where we're staying at the moment.
Smith laughed again.
"You're staying with me. The visitor's taken a liking to you."
Daniel was sitting in the middle of the back seat, so he could look out through the space between the front seats.
But he can't find us now. We're going too fast. He couldn't catch up with us.
"Doesn't need to. Wherever you are, he can find you. Once he's met you, he can always find you."
They drove a bit further, round more bends. Then Smith stopped the car and turned in his seat to face them.
"Why has he taken a liking to us?" asked Miles.
"He likes twins. Do, the lily-white boys, clothed all in green, oh."
He sang the words to a funny little tune. Daniel was getting worked up.
"What's that supposed to mean?"
he said rudely.
"Boys are better. Last time he got girls. He likes boys."
"What for?"
Daniel shouted in a voice that sounded like he was going to cry.
"Keeping the portals open, living and the dead."
Smith sang again.
"Living and dead, blood and bone, bone in the head and blood in the stone."
As he sang, he pushed his hands up through his hair and twisted it on top of his head, then wound something around it so it stayed there. Miles didn't like it, because now Smith looked like someone he'd seen before, and he didn't want to think about that.
"Come on,"
Smith said, getting out and pulling the seat forward. Daniel was nearest, but he sat scowling with his arms folded.
"No."
Smith reached inside and grabbed him. Miles scrambled out when he saw him holding Daniel round the waist. Daniel was kicking and squawking and trying to punch him, but his arms and legs just flailed around in the air. Then Smith turned him upside down and raised him high over his head.
"Shut up!"
he bellowed. Miles could see he was about to smash Daniel on the ground, head first. He was fighting to get enough breath to speak.
It's all right," he managed to say. "We'll do what you tell us. We will, really."
"Do you know what sound a skull makes when you bust it? Funny, sort of hollow sound. Not like a boiled egg. A boiled egg's packed tight. Brains are looser."
Smith turned Daniel over again and dropped him feet first, so he grazed his knees on the gravel as he fell. Miles helped him up and they clung to each other.
"The lily-white boys," said
Smith, grabbing each of them by an arm.
"You don't know who I am, do you? You don't know Wayland Smith, do you? But Wayland Smith knows them all. He knows them all by name, all the demons you can call. No guessing, he knows their names, because that's what he most wants to know. And when he calls them, they come right on through."
As he talked, he was dragging them to the door of a big old house. He opened it and pushed them inside, letting go of their arms and grabbing them from the back by their collars.
"Up,"
he ordered. There was a wide staircase in front of them, and he half pushed, half pulled them up the stairs, then down a passageway with doors all the way along. He opened one of these and gave the boys a shove so that they almost fell inside. The door closed after them, and there was the sound of a key in the lock. Hannah's car was sitting in the driveway of the Canterbury Road house when they arrived. The traffic had been bad on the ring road, and Bryony was feeling wound up enough. She groaned. "Oh, no, don't say I have to deal with her again already. Think of something to draw her off, would you? At least for now."
"No worries,"
said Elsingham calmly. "If you've got no worries, Elsingham, it's about time you shared a few more of mine."
"No, you don't get it, Inspector. No worries is Australian for fine, yes, I'll do it. I've been picking up the lingo. If there's nothing to worry about, you say, she'll be right.
She's always bloody right. That's what worries me, said Bryony, opening the door. But there was no avoiding Hannah. She was sitting on a bench in the hallway. What took you so long, Bryony? I have to talk to you about Claire. Bryony sat beside her. So? I've been with her in the Radcliffe for an hour. She's wide awake now, but she's acting like the Witch of Endor. What's up with her? It may take a while to find out. Has she told you anything about what she's been through? A load of guff about Andromeda in the sky. Nothing that makes any sense. She talks like she's auditioning for something. Have you known her behave like that before? Absolutely not. She can put it on, you know, play the princess and all that at a party, but she's always got a sense of humour about it. I don't like the way she's acting now. Give her a chance. She's in pretty bad shape, and we don't know what might have happened to her. Well, that's your department, isn't it? So I thought I'd come and check in with you. Look, Hannah, we've all been through the ringer on this. Why don't you go home now? I'll call you tomorrow so we can go and see her together. For once, Hannah gave in. She peeled herself off the bench with an exaggerated slowness and fixed Bryony with the narrow-eyed look. You do that, Miss Detective. Well, tell you what, I've got a better idea. I'll go and see Claire first thing tomorrow, and I'll meet you there. Fair enough. I'll be there if I can. Bryony walked through to the incident room and came face to face with Steve Latham. He was wearing a green corduroy suit and a new short haircut that made his face look oddly naked to someone used to looking at it through a thicket of unruly hair. He seemed genuinely pleased to see her, patting her shoulder warmly as he said hello. Bryony tried to return the greeting in the same spirit and suggested a cup of coffee. She led him into the kitchen. So, how's things? She asked, as she spooned out the Nescafe. Things is good. There's a great deal of interest in the application of clinical psychology to our line of business. Turns out to be looking like the right career decision, this PhD. So, you're definitely planning to return to CID? Definitely. Macready says he can use me at Thames Valley as a specialist. The call of the wild still has its pull, see? He smiled, with a bit too much charm. Can't resist an invitation to go back in the jungle when there's a predator around. And it sounds like you've got a real mess on your hands with this one. Was that a jibe? Bryony was determined not to bite. She remembered something her friend Jimmy had said at Vine Street Station. Bryony Williams and Steve Latham were going to get off on the wrong foot every time on every case, but that was how you could be sure they'd end up on the right one. Still, she couldn't resist throwing out a challenge. I'm told you arranged to have Claire Belmont moved to the Radcliffe. How's that? Steve was pulling out the inevitable cigarette packet.
I got some inside info from the medical staff at Wantage. Got a friend there, Gina Sutton. She finished her postgrad work last year, but we did some research together.
So what did she tell you?
Do you want the technical version?
Try me.
It's possible Claire Belmont has some mild brain injury. There's bruising on the left side of her head. It's not severe, and although they can't find any signs of deeper damage, internal injury isn't out of the question. She scored 15 on the Glasgow trauma scale, which is marginal, but her behaviour's giving rise to concern. Gina thought she might be showing signs of prosopagnosia, inability to recognise faces. It's been seen before in patients with hypothermia. At the Radcliffe we can get specialist assessment.
We?
Yes. I've got a friend at the Radcliffe too. He's short-circuiting all the bureaucracy we'd normally have to go through to get an interview with the patient so soon after admission. We're due there in half an hour.
Looks like you made some useful friends in Bristol. Look, Steve, there's rather a lot of background to pick up on where Claire's concerned, and there isn't time to fill you in right now. My plan is to leave the interview approach for a while and just talk to her with her friend Hannah present. Those two have a strong trust. That seems to be the best approach given the circumstances.
Circumstances being?
Among other things, I'm exploring the possibility that she's been hypnotised.
He shook out a cigarette, tapped it on the edge of the sink, lit it, inhaled, and let out a prolonged stream of curling smoke. Let's unscramble this a bit, shall we? First, I don't need background, not to start with. I'm approaching this from a clinical perspective. We go by clinical tests and behavioural signs, gestures, body language, eye movement, that kind of thing. Second, Hannah's not a good idea. I've met her. She's too pushy. Third, this hypnotism theory. It's almost certainly mistaken. Hypnotism resulting in prolonged behavioural modification is rare. Lastly, I've got Macready's authority for calling the shots on this interview. Bryony wrestled with a momentary impulse to protest, but managed to swallow it. After what had happened this morning, it wasn't a bad idea to have someone act as a buffer between her and Claire, so she could sit back and make some observations of her own. It was just after 5:30 when they got to the Radcliffe. Claire was walking aimlessly up the middle of a large public ward, wearing a white hospital gown and with her hair still tied back in a ponytail. She looked a bit lost, a bit aimless and rather drained. "We can't talk to her in here," Bryony said to the ward sister. "Is there somewhere a bit more private?" "I suppose you could go into the bereavement room," said the sister. "No one's using it at the moment. But no more than 20 minutes, mind. That's what her doctor says." The bereavement room was actually rather pleasant, with large windows and an arrangement of small armchairs covered in muted green fabric. There was even a vase of flowers on the coffee table in the centre. Claire sat staring at the flowers. Steve took a chair and moved it so that he was sitting directly in front of her, and Bryony was sidelined. "Claire," he said, "how are you feeling?" "I'm feeling fine." Well, at least she was responding to questions, which was an advance on what they'd met with this morning. But the words were spoken flatly and without any change in the direction of her gaze. "Good!" Steve clasped his hands together and leant forward. "Do you know what day it is, Claire?" "Friday." "Do you know where you are?" "Ward 7B at the Radcliffe Infirmary." "And I expect you're looking forward to going home. Next question, though, is where you've been." The eyes remained fixed on the vase, and it occurred to Bryony that Claire was just a little too posed, with her head tilted slightly to one side and her eyelids half shut. Steve was gazing at her. "Watch out," thought Bryony. "She'll bite you in a minute." "Where have you been, Claire?" "Wantage Hospital." "And before that?" "Up on the white horse. I was on its back." The words came unevenly, and were mouthed as if she was unfamiliar with their pronunciation. Steve met Bryony's eye for a second before continuing. "Who were you with?" "Jed." "Jed who?" "Jed." "Anyone else?" "Anyone else?" repeated Claire, with the look of a vixen. Steve persisted. "I'm asking if there was anyone else around." "Voices." "You heard voices? What kinds of voices? What were they saying?" There was a long, effortful intake of breath. "Lighting fools the way to dusty death." And now Steve was treated to the ruthless stare that Bryony had experienced a few hours ago. He sat back, without breaking eye contact. "They were quoting Macbeth, were they, these voices?" "Show his eyes and quit my sight. Let the earth hide him." Nothing in her face or voice gave any expression to this statement. "You were up on the White Horse Hill," Steve prompted. "You saw something, did you?" "The horse in the sky. Stars. Starlight." Claire was staring at the flowers again. They waited for her to continue. "It's coming, but she can't move." Steve drew his chair closer and spoke quietly. "Who can't move?" "Were you tied up?" This time the words came smoothly, as if she were talking in her sleep. "You're lying on the giant horse's back, Claire, looking at the horse in the stars. When you lie on the ground, the earth comes rushing to meet you. Gravity is a force that answers your weight. The world turns. One age wrenches its birth from another, and from the bloody space between them the powers rise up. Are you afraid to know them? Your arms are spread out, so you're like Andromeda."
chained by her wrists and ankles, waiting for the beast that has smelt your fear. You strain against the bonds like her. Now she knows for the first time just how alive she is. Fear tells her. Her breasts are bared to the monster's tusks. She looks in the eye of fate.
The last words were a quiet murmur, as if she were reciting something from memory. Andromeda? What's she afraid of? Asked Steve.
By the pricking of my thumbs, something wicked this way comes, through the fog and filthy air. It stops. Before it can tear her eyes from their sockets, the beast is turned to stone. An arm strikes at her chains, and her limbs are her own again. Perseus. But she mustn't look at him, because he's holding something that you can't look at. He's cut off the head of the Medusa. Holds it up, where the writhing monster will see it, and the flailing thing stops dead in the air. The bonds are broken. The head bleeds, and, as the blood falls, Pegasus rises. He spreads his wings and leaps, the horse in the sky. You can take flight now, on his back. He lifts you out of the coffin of mortality, and you can see below you the white shape of the horse on the hill, and the hollow of his manger. You can go where you please, Claire, and see all things. And now you know how the dark, pulsing blood of life is wasted on little beings. Tomorrow, and tomorrow, and tomorrow. Is that all it is? Strong life is born of spilt blood, and calls the dead to do its bidding. What are you going to do with your vast new life, Claire?
She stopped, and stared again at Steve, who leant back in his chair, holding her gaze. "Nice speech," he said. "What's it from? Or did you just make it up? Maybe it was written in the stars, eh? Perseus and Andromeda. He kills the Gorgon and uses its head to turn the other monster to stone. Nice work. An efficient way to deal with the forces of evil. Compared with the way we have to go about things. Anyhow, what I want to know," he leant forward again, "is what happened to you, Claire Belmont. You do know who you are, after all. What happened to you up there on the hill, eh?"
I don't know. There was a voice talking all the time.
Whose voice?
It was pulling and sucking at my thoughts, pumping images into my mind.
There was a brisk knock on the door, and a nurse poked her head in. "Time's up, I'm afraid." Steve steered Bryony out of the room by her elbow. Wonder how many more of those little speeches she's got stashed away. "What if she was assaulted?" said Bryony. I didn't like the sound of that stuff about sucking at her mind. Mind rape? That's a female fantasy, Bryony. "I do have a perspective on this, you know," she said, shaking off the grip on her elbow. "And I'm perfectly capable of finding my own way down a hospital corridor. You seem to be forgetting I've been virtually in charge of this aspect of the case." "Don't try to own cases, Bryony. I've told you about that before." "You've got a nerve. Look." A nurse came striding round the corner, wheeling a trolley loaded with sheets and towels. "We need to talk," said Steve. "I could do with a drink. Couldn't you? Eagle and Child's the nearest." Outside, a light rain was falling, and both of them struggled into their coats as they walked. They had the pub virtually to themselves, and she picked the window seat in the front parlour, unbuttoned her mac, and stared out at the gloomy view of St. Giles. No more Indian summer. Could she really stand this town as winter took hold, sleeting up the pavements and making the college walls look like the boundaries of grimy prisons? Steve came back with the drinks. "Half of shandy. Did I remember right? You won't get too silly on that, will you?" Bryony let him get settled and take the first swig of his pint. "Listen, Steve, we've got to get a few things straight. First, it's me that's got the background on this." "I told you, Bryony, you can't—" "Shut up, I haven't finished. It's got nothing to do with trying to own the case. It's to do with professional respect. You don't just come barging in and cutting across my judgment in the middle of a complex inquiry. You don't know what you're dealing with here, Bryony. You tell me I don't know what I'm dealing with.
I've been on this case for a week, morning, noon and night. I've talked to Claire's friends, read her diary, seen her bedroom, and even had a bloody terrifying nightmare about her. You sit there and gaze into her beautiful eyes for 20 minutes, and suddenly you're the expert? Are you trying to prove you're the most annoying man in Oxford? It's hot competition, believe me, but you're looking pretty likely in it. He took a gulp and wiped the foam from his upper lip. "Oh, Bryony," he said, mock morosely. "I didn't know you felt that way about me." There was a long pause as they finished their drinks. Then he looked at her sideways, and suddenly she giggled. "Sorry, I'm afraid you're funny when you're tragic." "Do I get a turn at the speech-making now?" he asked. "Because there's a couple of things you might want to bear in mind before you go barging back in to consult the oracle down there. Either Claire Belmont's got some neural damage, or she's got psychopathic tendencies." "She's got what?" "There's all the indications. 1, eye contact. There's no social eye contact at all, just staring at you, or staring in some other direction. 2, body language." "What body language?" "Exactly. None at all. She was stock still practically the whole time. No movement in the face either. 3, she's delusional, conjuring up images of herself as Andromeda in the sky. And this idea that she's psychic, I've just been reading her diary in the incident room back there, whether she actually believes she's got psychic powers, or whether it's a game she plays to manipulate people, I wouldn't know at this stage. But actually, I'm much more inclined to think she's got neural damage, which could predate the episode she's just been through. In the diary, there's something about her being unable to see faces, including her own in the mirror. Isn't that right?" "Yes." "You see, that's a primary symptom of prosopagnosia. She talked about voices as if she was hearing people but not seeing them. Another symptom, though research isn't clear on this yet, may be the inability to match facial and emotional expression. That would account for her tendency to look at you as if she's about to stick a dagger in your throat." "Great. A critical witness who can't recognise anyone. So where does this get us?" Chapter 26. They strolled back towards Canterbury Road as a muddy kind of darkness gathered around them. "So, do you like Oxford?" Steve asked. "I'm surprised how well it seems to suit Macready. I thought he'd miss his old hunting ground, you know, and his hand-picked team. But he seems to be thriving." "I'm not so sure about Oxford. People have this romance with it, and that turns me off, especially when all my time spent discovering its ugly realities. But it's got something. As for Macready, I'll make a bet with you." "Oh, yeah?" He looked sideways at her, with a distinctly flirtatious smile. "I bet he's back in London within 2 years. It's all management here since the amalgamation. He spends most of his time on the phone in the office, moving personnel around. As soon as the Pitt Rivers killings were reported, he was out of there and in the thick of it. Anyway, I thought your brief was to advise on motive." "What's the motive for that?" "Part of a cover-up cycle. Nash and Crouch were onto something and their efforts had to be scotched." "Is that all you've got to say?" "You're avoiding the issue, Steve." "What issue exactly?" "All the issues, a whole pack of them. What Nash and Crouch were onto, the inscription on the stone. The busy fiend control. Macready's followed that connection. It belongs to the story of Saul raising demons." Yeah, all that. Stoning to death, very biblical. Did you know Nash and Crouch were meeting to study a book about raising demons? Crouch took it out of the Ashmolean Library. A rare book, John Dee, the Book of Enoch. Was never actually printed, but Crouch located a handwritten copy. Why didn't you tell me about this?" Instead of answering, Steve fished out his nearly empty cigarette pack and started probing it. Bryony lost her temper. "Leave off the bloody fags for a minute, will you? You've been withholding vital information from me." "Nothing vital about it, in my view. Crouch was an antiquarian. Overactive curiosity's a professional trait. He couldn't resist following up some leads of his own, and he drew Nash into the game. That's my best guess. I doubt the book had any special relevance, but the curious are a nuisance to anyone with things to hide." "Crap! As for the stoning, I'd say this has more to do with control than with fiends and demons. It's a paradox, an act of chaotic fury. But its purpose is to send the message that this guy has total control.
He knows who's doing what when, and he can get at them.
Steve, that was the most extreme act. There must have been some more direct reason for it.
Control freaks are extreme, because they're out of control. That's how it works. Stoning people is actually an ancient form of punishment. That's relevant, I'd say. Relevant to the psychological profile at any rate.
And do you think he was trying to punish Sylvie and the 2 little girls he killed in Wayland's Wood? That doesn't make sense.
Different episodes, different meanings. Killing as a substitute for possessing them in some other way. This guy might be impotent, especially if he's on cocaine. It's a pathology of control.
I'm afraid that logic's too fancy for me, and I still think it's avoiding the issues.
She was about to elaborate, but as they turned the corner into Canterbury Road, it was immediately obvious that something had gone wrong. There were too many police cars, and uniformed officers were milling around the entrance of the building. Steve and Bryony doubled their pace and arrived suitably breathless, to be greeted by Elsingham outside the closed door of the main incident room. "I need to have a word with you, Inspector, before you go in there. I've tracked down Donnelly, and he's ready to see you. But we've got a new situation, I'm afraid. I've asked Donnelly to wait in there." He pointed to the door of the small office next to the kitchen. "Dr. Gleeson and his wife are in the incident room. Seems the boys haven't got back from school. Canning's gone to Woodstock to keep an eye on things there. But I'd have to say it's not looking too good."
"Has Macready been told?"
asked Bryony. "He's on his way. Left immediately we reported it."
"This is Detective Chief Inspector Latham, by the way," she said. "He's here on Macready's instructions."
Steve led the way into the incident room and introduced himself to the Gleesons, who sat at either end of the main table, with D.C. Westcott between them. Gleeson was properly dressed for once, at least by his standards, in jeans and a tweed jacket, with his shoes laced and his hair combed behind his ears. Everything else about him, though, signalled acute distress. His jaw was pushed forward with such rigidity that he was almost unable to speak. "My wife rang an hour ago. The boys were supposed to be on the 5 o'clock bus, because Daniel had a detention that was going to keep them back at school. She went to the bus stop at 5:45 to meet them, but they weren't on the bus at all, so I rang the school caretaker, who managed to get me on to the headmaster to check the class roll. Miles and Daniel weren't at school all day. We've confirmed that after their interview with Sergeant Canning this morning, they left Woodstock on the 10 o'clock bus," said Elsingham. "The driver remembers them getting off at South Parade."
"They like going to one of the shops there," said Angela Gleeson. "They call it the Tuck Shop. It seems they spent their pocket money on chocolates and fishing line."
"Fishing line?" echoed Gleeson. "They've never been fishing in their lives. Then, the worst of it is they tried to go home, and I was there all the time. They must have been coming to see me." Angela Gleeson was tight-lipped. "They were missing the dog," she said. Elsingham looked at some notes. "The constable on watch at 4 Alquin Close noticed 2 schoolboys in the street sometime between 10:30 and 11, but says he saw them going away from the house towards the Woodstock Road. He thought nothing of it at the time, because he just assumed they were the neighbours' children." Gleeson interrupted. "I can guess exactly what happened. They saw a policeman outside the house, thought they'd get done for skiving, and turned tail." "Have they done this before?" said Steve. "Truancy is usually a habit." "Not to my knowledge. They're not exactly angels, but they're not good deceivers either. Are you sure there wasn't something in that interview this morning to upset them? Why did you need to talk to them anyway?" He glared at Bryony.
"One thing at a time," she said. "First we need to get this new part of the picture as clear as we can. If they changed their minds about going home, where might they have gone?"
"For God's sake!" Angela Gleeson suddenly burst out. "We've been over and over all that."
"Just think about it, Mrs. Gleeson. Where might they have gone? What were their options?"
"I've given the police a list of their friends already. They should have been checked by now."
"The boys have a maths tutor, Leonard Croydon. Where does he live?"
"Bevington Road," said Gleeson. "I suppose that's an outside possibility. I took them to his flat a couple of times in June when they started lessons with him." "I'll go there now," said Steve.
I'd be interested to meet this tutor. I'll come too, said Gleeson, springing to his feet. I can't stand this sitting around. Angela Gleeson was only just controlling herself. Another thing, she said, her voice faltering. Miles has asthma. He has an inhaler with him, but it's nearly run out. Bryony could see that they weren't going to get any further here. It was time for the next move. Mrs. Gleeson, we'll do everything we possibly can to find Miles and Daniel. But the best thing you can do now is go home. Home? Which home? Tears were starting in her eyes, and her voice jumped in pitch. Inspector, do you have even the slightest idea what this is like for us? As I said, Mrs. Gleeson, we'll do everything we possibly can. D.C. Westcott can arrange for a car to take you back to Woodstock. She retreated to the kitchen for some coffee and a rapid consultation with Elsingham, who immediately began raking through the cupboards above the sink. Funny how desperate you can get for a chocolate digestive, he said. Elsingham, how can you think about biscuits in a situation like this? You're right. What say I nip down to the Chinese takeaway and get us some sweet and sour pork? I couldn't even look at it. Check that Donnelly hasn't given us the slip, will you? Will do. What's with that new DCI, Latham? Has he been put in over you, then? You're the soul of discretion, aren't you, Elsingham? No, he has not been put in over me. He's not part of the command structure. He's been brought in as a special advisor to Macready. You'd better go and get your dinner. She checked her watch. I need a few minutes to pull my thoughts together. I'll start Donnelly's interview at 10 past, so you can join us as soon as you get back. Left to herself, Bryony leant against the kitchen wall, put her head back and closed her eyes. Another gruelling interview was the last thing she wanted to do right now, but those boys were not going to be found by rushing around the streets. If they were in real danger, then getting them out of it meant breaking the case. The whole case. She gulped down the mug of lukewarm instant and went back to find Donnelly. Chapter 27. He was hunched over the desk and seemed startled by her approach. Sorry, he said. I'm a bit on edge. I think we all are. Come this way, would you? We'll talk in my office. She led the way through and sat him down. Mr. Donnelly, I'm sure what you've got to say is important, and judging from what you put in your statement, I suspect it won't be straightforward. I need a full, accurate record of our conversation, and the best way for me to get it is to use this tape recorder. Is that agreeable to you? Several expressions seemed to pass across his face, but the dominant one was fear. Who's going to hear it? Only the police. If we need you as a court witness later, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. He's not to know what I've told you. He's not to know it was me. Who's not to know? That's what I'm going to explain. Bryony switched on the tape recorder, then opened the desk drawer and took out the printed advertisement for the problem clinic. Someone made this little calling card and gave it to Sylvie, and someone broke the window of your office. Are these two things connected, do you think? Yes. How? It's a long story. I thought it might be. So where does it begin? I came up to Oxford 12 years ago to read PPE. PPE? Philosophy, Politics and Economics. And that was in 1962? Yes. After the first couple of terms, I got a warning from my tutor. He didn't think I was up to it. I couldn't hack the economics, see? And I wasn't all that interested in politics. What I really wanted to do was philosophy, but not the kind of philosophy I was being taught. I was interested in the ideas of a man called Giordano Bruno, a Renaissance thinker who created a whole cosmological system for the workings of the human mind. He was a Copernican and ended up being burnt at the stake. He was inspiring to me. I read everything he wrote, and then all the works that influenced him. I was reading in Duke Humphrey's library one morning, and when I left to go for lunch, someone followed me out. It was a middle-aged man I'd seen in there a few times. Actually, I'd taken some notice of him because he didn't look like a don. He was big and robust, carried himself well. Didn't even wear glasses. Anyway, he asked me to have lunch with him at the White Horse. Said he thought we had interests in common.
That lunch went on for 2 hours. After the pub closed, we walked in the parks. I told him a bit about my interest in Bruno, then started to unload all my worries about my degree, and he said he could help. First of all, he talked about Bruno's memory system, which I'd read about but didn't really understand. He said he'd teach me how to use it, because once I'd got the hang of it, I'd be able to learn anything at all, easily and quickly.
What was this man's name?
He told me to call him Finch, like the bird, he said. I had a dream that night that a bird was flying along the pavement in the high. Then it flew in the door of the Magdalen College tower, and I followed it. I climbed to the top and saw it sitting on the edge. Then it took off. I climbed up after it and took off as well. I flew over the city. It was absolutely exhilarating. Bryony was anxious to avoid too many elaborations.
You said he was going to teach you?
Yes, this memory system. It was based on Bruno's ideas, but it was really something Finch had developed himself from a whole range of sources, some of them quite recent. I started going to his house once a week for tutorials, and my college tutor couldn't believe the improvement. I got pretty full of myself, I can tell you. I began to think I could do 3 degrees at once and get a first in all of them. When I suggested that to Finch, he just smiled and said, "Of course, but why make yourself conspicuous? That could become an inconvenience." So why wasn't this taught to every student in Oxford? I asked. Why learn in tedious bits and pieces when you could be developing a whole universe of understanding? And he said, "Is that what you most want to know?" It was a way he had of teasing you, to counter any question you asked. Donnelly stopped and began to turn pages in his notebook. "I shouldn't be talking about this in the past tense," he said. "Finch is very much a present influence." "On you?" Donnelly made an odd little squirming movement. "On lots of people."
"So did you meet other people through him?"
"Occasionally, other students of his."
"Do you remember any names?"
He leafed through the notebook again. Greg somebody, Irene Horton, Claude Maybrick, Len Croydon, Aston somebody.
Len Croydon? Tell me about him."
Maths prodigy. At that time he was still at school, supposed to be such a whiz Finch was the only teacher who could follow him. They were developing some new theory of geometry together.
"And where were these lessons held?"
In his house on Boar's Hill, one of those rambling Victorian places. At this point, Elsingham returned and started signalling to Bryony through the glass partition.
"Excuse me a minute,"
she said, pausing the tape recorder. She stepped out and closed the door behind her.
"What now, Elsingham? This is not the best time for an interruption. He's starting to open up in there."
"Just got a call from HQ with an update. Macready's gone over to Bevington Road. Croydon's landlord saw 2 schoolboys outside the house sometime between 10:30 and 11 this morning. He knocked on the window when he saw one of the boys raking up the gravel, and they took off. And he says he hasn't seen Croydon for a couple of days."
"Great. We should have had our eye on him. He's mixed up in this, after all, and we let him fall through the net."
"How do you know he's mixed up in it? The kids might have just decided to pay him a visit."
Bryony nodded towards the office. "What I'm hearing in there. Come on. I'm recording it, but we're going to need some notes for a quick follow-up. Hope you can write fast."
Donnelly had resumed the hunched position and was massaging his wrists.
"So you started this program of study with Finch?" Bryony prompted. "Did you talk to his other students?"
"Occasionally. Irene was quite friendly. She asked me what level I was on, and I didn't know what she meant. I asked her if she was doing the memory system, and she didn't know what I meant. He was teaching us all completely different things, or apparently so. Then a few weeks later he asked me if I was interested in moving to another level. He said if I was, I should come to a lecture he was giving for a student society called Second Sight. The people there struck me as just a bunch of pseuds, messing about with Ouija boards and talking about Madame Blavatsky. I couldn't see why Finch was wasting his time on them, and I told him as much. In the realms of the mind, most of them are children, he said, and all of them are unformed, but some of them have capacities I can work with. I'm interested in seeing whether you have those capacities." I was a bit offended by that, to be honest, and I said to him, "Surely you'd know that by now. I'm talking about capacities at the next level." That was his reply. Bryony glanced at Elsingham to see how he was managing with the notes, then pressed on.
"Finch had no connection to the university?"
"Not in Oxford. He'd been to several universities abroad. He despised English education. His idea of teaching was something quite different. On the night of the lecture he talked for an hour and a half at least, without a break, and every one of us was totally absorbed. It was stuff I'd heard bits of before, all about the will. He's got this theory that you have to find your true will, because that's the only law in your life. What do you most want to know? That makes the centre of your mental universe, so all your other knowledge revolves around